You are listening to a Dynamic Works Productions podcast. This show is available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio Network, and many, many more podcast services around the world. You can find all our content, music, videos, books, podcasts, and more on our website, www.dynamicworksproductions.com. Have questions, comments, or concerns for us? Head on over to the social tab on www.dynamicworksproductions.com if you'd like to talk to us. Now, on with the show. Welcome, Fork family members, to a very special episode of the Fork in Your Ear podcast. This is going to be a spoiler review, discussion, everything in between podcast on Sony Interactive Entertainment and Naughty Dog's The Last of Us Part 2. So if you don't want to be spoiled for The Last of Us Part 2, stop listening now. Catch you next week. You were warned in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's going on? I'm Tim K. Trotter. Super fucking early in the morning, at least for me. And joining me is my second Washington, the other Washington compatriot, all the way from the East Coast. The one, the only, the recognizer? I just said it. It's a thing. The recognizer himself, Damian Newman.
What's going on, man? What's going on? How are you on this 4th of July, man?
I just woke up like 15 minutes ago. I'm a little groggy. I got my coffee. I got I got all the things that I need to get going on, I guess, as it would. As I said, we're doing our Last of Us review, spoiler discussion thing, and yeah, I mean, I guess let's get into it. I assume, because you are a note-taking machine.
Oh man!
I assume you got notes.
It is funny because I have my notebook sitting right here. In front of me. Yeah, I have 4 different categories in front of me. I got storytelling, I got mechanics, I got character build.
Excellent.
I got compare and contrast. And so yeah, I am ready. The compare and contrast is a little bit in depth because it's not only compare and contrast between the parallel build of Abby and Lev. Between Ellie and Joel, but also the compare and contrast between part 1 and part 2.
Good.
As well. So
very good.
Yeah, let's do this. I am ready.
Well, wherever you want to take us, I'll let you take us, and I'll chime in with my thoughts. Since I am organized to the point of I set up the mic. I already fucked it up once before we officially started, and I'm just chilling on. It's hella muggy over here for the 4th. By the way, which is really odd for Washington State. Usually it's like 100 degrees, sunny, which is not good for fires. But it is fucking muggy as hell right now. Like I'm looking at my window and I'm seeing fog.
Yeah, I stepped outside to go to my car real quick before we started. It's getting there here. It's pretty hot, and that was like a little before 11. Today, and I'm like, oh boy, it's going to be a scorching today. Yeah. So, but yeah, okay. Joe dies. I'm just flat out saying Joe died, and it hurt my heart. It hurt my heart. But no, the opening, and that's what I want to talk about. That opening 15 minutes and the recap scene, and just we talked about this last night, just to see. And shout out to Troy Baker, because, like I said, of all the roles he plays, nothing compares to how he's Joel. Like, it's just he turns that on and he just goes into a different world. And that opening 15 minutes, watching that game, I had to catch myself.
You talking about the only time where you actually play as Joel and you're riding through the countryside?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Literally. And I had to keep catching myself, because throughout the duration of the game, I kept calling it a movie, because that's how in depth and real and tangible and just spectacular the acting was in this game. But it grabs you right there. It grabs you right there. I think it does a pretty good job of recapping what was in part one.
Yeah, it definitely hits the most important parts. And I think the interesting thing about that is that it's from Joel's perspective.
Right.
And he's I mean, he's obviously, I think it's fair to say that he's a fairly burdened character, and he's just trying to unburden himself just a tiny bit by letting Tommy know what the deal is.
Right. And I think that took a lot of strength for him, because at that point, you got to assume that they probably have been in Jackson maybe about maybe a year or two at that point, because even when he told him that, and you go back into Jackson and then you interact with Ellie, you can see she's already older than she was at the end of part one. So it's been some time he's been holding that in before he told Tommy exactly what happened. And I agree. He's burdened. You get this feeling, for let's say for the sake of conversation, you didn't play The Last of Us Part 1, and you jump right into 2, and you see how Joel's struggling to tell Tommy what happened. You can see that he's this character that has been holding this weight for a while, and still holding this weight, because at this time Ellie still doesn't know.
Right.
And you feel, or you see him as maybe this person that did this selfish thing, but he's not a bad he's a good person. And he did that.
I mean, isn't that kind of the most debatable point?
It can be. It can be. However, I'm gonna say this. I'm not a parent, but I have a niece and I have a nephew who I love very dearly, as if they were my own. And I would go to the end of the world for them. And to be in Joel's shoes and start off, now we're about to go into part one, and to start off part one, to play his daughter, and then you see the opening 15, 20 minutes of that game, and you see his daughter die in his arms. You see his daughter taken from him. And you fast forward to years later, where he encounters this little girl, and they start off with their differences of them two not wanting to deal with each other, not wanting to have anything to do with each other, because Joel comes from one world, Ellie comes from another world.
Right.
And you see how they bond, and you look at this guy, you look at these two, and you see that Joel feels as if he got a second chance. Ellie is Sarah all over again. Ellie is the one to him that he gets to pick back up where he left off, or where he was cut off from, with her. And you see in that moment when, and this is the part that grabbed me the most. And like I said, I went into this game literally Monday to Thursday playing The Last of Us. So you're talking about 15 hours of me playing as Joel right into The Last of Us 2. So I got a chance to see how they interacted with each other, Ellie and Joe, and when they first met, and them going from Joe saying, "I'm just lucky I didn't get my head blown off by a kid," to The Last of Us 2, where he took a horse from Jackson, Wyoming, and rode it to Salt Lake City to track down Ellie because he was worried. Because you could see when he got off the horse, he walked to her and he said, "What were you thinking writing a note like that? You don't just write a note and leave like that. You come and talk to me." And he grabbed her and he held her like he was his daughter. He loved her. And that type of love, that's a bond that if you felt that type of love, you would go to hell and back for that person. So to bring that back,
we did in this game.
We did. He went across the country, and he had no doubt in his mind. He went through hell and back, and he would do it again. And so when you bring that back to the end of part 1 and why he chose what he did, that is a parent's love. And now logically, it may not have been the right decision, but I understand why he did that. I understand, because I would have done the same for my nephew.
Okay.
And that's where I come in and say, yes, he probably made a bad choice, but he's not a bad man. I think any person looking at hindsight can say, "You are a terrible person for doing what you did. You did something extremely selfish, and you robbed humanity of a kid."
Sure.
But you cannot say that if it's one of your own in that same chair. And that's how he looked at Ellie, as his own blood, even though his own daughter was taken from him. Ellie was Sarah number 2. And to see him in the opening 15 minutes and him finally unbearing that weight, Tommy, you can see it in his eyes and his face. Like, I know I messed up. I know I did. And it hurt him when Ellie found out. It hurt him more than anything.
Yeah.
Because he truly loved her, and it's just, like I said, that first 15 minutes, it sets the tone exactly for, I think, what's to come later on down the road. But I'm gonna tell you, it hurt. It hurt like hell playing that 15 hours in Joel, and to see the first 2 hours and watch him die like that. Oh, Tim, it hurt. It hurt me, man. I wanted each and every person in that room to suffer, and
I mean, they did.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
When I saw that happen, I said, "You know what? They gotta die. I'm coming in hot. I'm not stealthing this in. They gonna know I'm here. When I come and fire each and every single one of these first people in this room, they gonna know I'm here. I'm shooting everything, and I'm coming in loud, because I was that hurt when they killed Joel, man. Oh, that hurt. Oh, that hurt."
So let me ask you a couple of things here. So one, was Joel's death spoiled for you before you played the game?
I don't think so, because of the reaction that I had. But
okay,
I will say this, and this is something we talked about a year ago. When was the first trailer show? Was it TSA?
It was 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was one of the speculations, because we wasn't sure if we saw that Ellie was grown, she was an adult, but we wasn't sure for that if that was Joel actually in the room talking to her, or if she was just hearing Joel, in her voice, in her head. So we kind of came up with the speculation, okay, Joel may not be around.
Sure.
So that I think that kind of stayed in the crawls of our mind, but it wasn't spoiled for me. I heard about the leak, but I never saw that leak video purposely.
That's good. Neither did I. So, when I think the thing for me was, I knew the second they, because the gameplay sequence from the start of the game is, you're Joel for a minute, then you're Ellie 4 years later, and then you're going out on patrol, and then you're this. And this is how I felt, and then I was like, who's this new bitch? Like, who the fuck is this new bitch? And it was interesting because I didn't connect that she was the one in that one trailer from like ages ago. It happened in the game where she gets like all tied up by the Seraphites, and it's like with the fire, and it's like super dark and stuff. And so when I was first playing as Abby, I didn't know her name, I didn't know anything. All I knew was she was above Jackson, and she had a little crew with her, and it seemed like whatever that she was there to do was deadly serious. And just for people who are listening, who either don't care about spoilers and just want to hear us talk about it, or if they want to know what was going on, like I had my girlfriend sitting by me for pretty much the first half of the game. And when when I looked out in the snowy fields there in Jackson, looking down at Jackson, and it was I didn't know until later it was, God, who was the dude? What was the dude's name that wanted to be with? Yeah, when it was Abby and Owen looking down on Jackson.
Yeah.
And I said out loud, I was like, this is going to be the chick who's going to kill Joel. Like, I am playing as Joel's killer right now. Like, I just instinctively, from what they told me within the game, having not seen the leaked, having not read the leaks, having stayed fucking far away from the leaks, I just knew in my gut, and I said it out loud, and Jessica turned to me, and she was just like, you're probably right.
Yeah. And she's there for some reason. If they're switching to her and you have to play as Abby or a certain character that early in the game, that character is there for a reason. They're not just going to be a character, fly-by character,
For sure, because they did the same thing in Uncharted 3 and Uncharted 4, where you got to play as young Drake. And it's like, okay, these old scenes with child Drake are super important.
Right.
And I think one of the things that I really like and respect about Naughty Dog is their ability to make you like or even love a character, but then also make you view that character from like a completely different angle.
I think that comes with that's talented storytelling.
Sure.
That's storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you have to be able to have some type of empathy, or I wouldn't say empathy, but some type of understanding on where the character is coming from to see that, to grasp that perception, and to even, start off like how I guess how they're painted, which I'm saying the WLC, which is the group that Abby is a part of, and when you're playing from Ellie's perspective,
don't you mean the WLF?
I'm sorry, yeah, LF. I don't know where I got LC from. But WL, right. But from Ellie's perspective, it seems that this faction is some type of terrorist, war-hungry, power-hungry, which in the hindsight, you see towards the end, they kind of are this power-hungry faction, but you also see by the time you play as Abby, that they are, this civilization, this colony that is bunked up in a stadium, but they have everything. They got education system for the kids. They have weight rooms. They have, other facilities to better themselves and to live a better life, which is almost, well, you could say exactly what Tommy and them have in Jackson, and so you see that, okay, I get where you're going, Naughty Dog. You're trying to make me see that, okay, Abby is not this terrible enemy that we perceive her to be. However, I'm still pissed off with her, and I don't want to play as her because she just killed one of my favorite characters in the game. But, you're making me understand why she felt the way she felt. towards
Sure.
Joe, and and saying that these aren't really bad people until obviously you get toward the middle as she meets Lev, and you get toward, Abby has to go back and get the medicine to save Lev's sister, and then you can see that between the Sephiroths and WLF, they go to war, but I get where the storytelling comes in, as far as wanting you to make me understand why Abby is so important to the story. I just at that point, I wanted her to go. That early in the game, I was like, I don't want to play it. Why? But why? I would have been fine had you would have gave me day one Abby, show me, okay, this is why she was upset with Joel. Joel killed her father. You gave me that that reconciliation, that you brought it full circle, and that would have been it. I'd have been completely fine. I would have been completely fine, to be honest. Because I didn't want to play it. Even at the end, I understood why Abby felt, her build up and her character build up toward it, but I was like, I don't care. I'm Team Ellie all the way. Like I'm Team Ellie. But what did you think of the other characters?
So, so for me, when they, so like, I mean, you obviously play as Abby for a bit in the very beginning. You play as all three principal characters until they die for like the first, I don't know what that is, like the first 2 hours of the game.
Yeah.
And the thing, like, one, I'm glad that Naughty Dog didn't make me, like, hold square or hit square to execute Joel.
Right.
I'm glad that choice was the character's choice, and to a lighter extent, the game, and obviously the game director's choice to do that, to show that to you. And I think something that's interesting about that scene that I personally got from that scene, because I've seen all the things online about like the people shitting on this game who were so furious about Joel biting it, a couple hours into this fucking huge game. Like,
right.
Make no bones about it. Like, this game, and I felt I stopped and smelled the roses and everything, and I my game clocked in at 32 hours, clear time, and I think something that came across to me, and maybe it's just me being me or whatever, but I felt I got everything emotionally that I needed for Joel in that scene, with the beauty of the motion capture and the beauty of Joel's looks and how he sounded, and everything that went on there. Now, it's interesting because a friend of mine who's been on the show before, the Killbot, saw the leaks before he got the game, and was furious. He felt, Naughty Dog like disrespected the character. And something that, like, as a person who's, written a book before, and, would love to have more things that I wrote public and stuff, I honestly do side with, with the creator when it comes to... Well, yeah, in this particular scene, but I'm talking about it in a more broad, general sense, that I side with the creator when it comes down to how they felt or how they interpreted a scene. Like, while, a lot of people don't agree that, like, George Lucas went back many times to the original Star Wars trilogy and added things or tweaked things or changed things, I'm of the opinion that, well, that's his fucking right as the creator. and
Right.
if it's being viewed differently by the public, then that's kind of on him as a storyteller the first time ago. And I realize a movie is a bit of a different thing than, say, a book or maybe even a video game, because I think we assume, because of the position that Naughty Dog has found themselves in, that they basically have unilateral, they have true final say in everything. When ultimately
Right.
at the end of the day, you know, I'm sure Druckmann probably had to fight for a couple of different things in this game to like be in the game the way that he wanted it, because he's got a team of, I don't even know how big Naughty Dog's team is. Got to be like 500 people now at this point.
Right.
And you've got Sony to answer to, a big public facing PR company. So the fact that they got as much grit and rawness out of The Last of Us Part 2 without it being like, without somebody from the top stepping in and being like, hey, maybe let's not kill Joel in the first 2 hours.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine Druckmann? Because at that point in time, it was later. It was later in Andrew House,
That's
and
true.
can you imagine showing them the first 2 hours to later and Andrew, and they're like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Joe's gone. No, but I give them kudos for showing, for just letting Naughty Dog do what they do on that. Because I agree with you. They could have easily said, you know what? He's just as important as Ellie. I don't know if we should, if we're going to take him out, one, I don't know if we should do it that early, or two, I don't even know we should take him out at all. But
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So I listened to um, Greg Miller's kind of funny games cast, spoiler cast, which had Neil Druckmann and Troy
like say,
Baker and
Ashley,
and
Ashley
Ashley
Johnson.
Johnson on there. And it's interesting because Neil said in that show that he had the idea, or at least the base plot points, with Joel dying right away and that stuff, for The Last of Us Part 2 7 years ago.
So he knew. He knew
So
after the
he
end, after
knew
part one.
where he
Knew at
wanted to
part one.
go when he was
Yep.
finishing up, would have been Left Behind, right? The DLC
Yeah.
for Last of Us. So he knew, you know, which means that probably early on, those executives and Ashley and everything, like they knew, like going into the project, like this was what it was going to be,
Right.
And it's interesting because in that spoiler cast, and you know, although kind of funny doesn't need any shout out from me or anything, they're doing just fine. If you're a Last of Us fan, I think you owe it to yourself to understand from the perspective of the two main characters and the creator, writer, director, what was going through their heads in that scene. And it's interesting because did you watch that or listen to that at all?
I watched a few of that because Greg had about 3 different spoiler casts dealing with The Last of Us 2. I did watch the one with Druckmann, Baker, and Johnson.
Yeah, did you watch the
I didn't
whole
watch it
did
all.
you watch the whole thing?
Nah, I didn't
Okay.
get through it all. I didn't get through it
It
all.
was interesting because Troy very vehemently took up this point of gamers turning on The Last of Us.
Mm-hmm.
And he said if anybody wants to blame anybody specific for The Last of Us Part 2 failing, this group of people, Troy said to blame him because
Wow.
he said that he thought, even though Neil said they had it in the scene on the day, that he thought he could have gone deeper and emoted even more with the facial capture. Because he said, what's going on through my head as Joel in that scene was, I'm looking up, I'm being held down, and he's like, and I'm being held down by like real people in a room,
Mm-hmm.
looking up at Abby, played by masterfully by Laura Bailey, and he's
Right.
like, and he said, what I'm being told in my direction is to give the look of saying, you know, this is what comes of my choices. This is what happens when I get soft. This is what happens when I let my guard down. This is what happens when I love again.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, so if you didn't feel that in that scene, he says, that's on me, and I take responsibility. And he said, and I'm mad that not everybody got that, you know? And so that was a very roundabout way of me saying that for me, when I saw that scene, the way it was played out, having not had it spoiled for me, like I knew, I was like, yeah, like I felt that he did for me, you know, and obviously it can't be for everybody because or else it wouldn't be as divisive as the game is. Like I felt Troy gave me what I needed for that. Like I saw in his face, like, you know, fuck, this is it. This I've done something to this bitch. So horrible or so simple and unimportant, because at that point, you know, I didn't know, you know, and like this is how I end. Like we're gonna fucking 9-iron his face in.
Mm-hmm. I think when you saw the moment where, you know, him and Tommy hit the room, they're in the room with the BLF, and he looks around. It's like a eerie quietness after they introduce themselves, and he looks around, and you know right then and there, shit is going down.
Mm-hmm.
And that moment when he says, he looks at them and he tells Abby, just go ahead and say the speech you've been practicing to say.
Yeah.
You know?
And
and that's when you know he at that moment said, okay, obviously I've done something to you in the past.
Yeah.
And I may not remember or know what it was, but it had to be something so heinous or so bad for you to come all the way out here to pin me down in the room to try to kill me. And that was that moment of, you know, he accepted, you know, and it was hurtful to watch, to watch, and it was hurtful to pin Ellie down and to make her watch. You know, this is somebody, now at the point of the game, you don't know, you know that they are, because they kept saying, they kept trying to insinuate, I don't know what's going on with you and Joe, or you and Joe okay, and she kept saying, yeah, we're fine, we're good, we're cool. So you know that.
Well, I want to point out something on that, and I don't know if you replayed any of those early scenes after beating the game, but like I replayed a little bit of the first scenes there, and I've been watching Jessica go through the game. By the way, super slowly, like she's not even out of Jackson yet, and I'm just like, how can you not? How can you not know? Like, come on, like play more, girl. Which is, you know, a whole other thing, but you know, whatever. And like, oh gosh, I lost what I was saying. So like when, like, you know, Ellie and Dinah are talking about, you know, what's going on with Joel and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, in the beginning, you're just like, okay, well, something happened. But if you go back and play, you're just like, oh, this was right after the last words that they ever would say to each other.
Right, and that's what I was
basically. And I was like, holy shit. Like, what a wraparound, you know?
That's what I was thinking too. Because you don't see that until the end of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't know. And that's what makes it hurt even more, is that she watched her father figure die in front of her days or a day after they just begin to place the first foot down on the road of redemption together, you know, or of trying to rebuild what they had that was tethered, that was damaged, you know, off of a heavy lie, you know, and it hurt to see that. It hurt. But I will say this, and I've read a lot of the backlash too, of the negativity of Joel being taken out of the game or quote unquote felt disrespected. I don't think he was disrespected in a way that, because you see him throughout the game, you see him in hints and parts where Ellie just flex.
And
You know?
that's the thing that has driven me crazy, because like I fucking lost my damn mind fighting with my friend Killbot
Mhm.
over this game, who hasn't played it but saw both Joel's death scene. I guess he apparently saw the boat, the actual final scene with Abby, and he read a bunch of stuff, and then he pointed me to two YouTube videos which I watched, and halfway through these YouTube videos that are raging against Last of Us and why it's a terrible game and nobody should play it.
Was it Skill Up and Upper Echelon?
Oh, I don't fucking remember. I don't remember trash like that, Dame.
That doesn't even get I didn't even get a piece of my attention.
Yeah, because like I had just beat the game, and I actually went to go talk to Killbot about it because I wanted him to play the game, because he was one of my friends who was super super excited about it, and Jessica hadn't beat it yet. And like I said, she stopped watching me before the end of day 3 as Ellie, so she doesn't know what happens after, which is why I'm excited for her to get the fuck through it so that I can see how she reacts, because she actually, like I said, she watched, the Joel death scene with me, and she was like, that fucking sucks, but I get it. Like she took it like a champ, like how you're supposed to take it, I guess.
Well, I would say this. He had to die.
Sure.
I think he had to die, or either that or something just as intense to build up the motivation of why Ellie is the way she is.
Sure.
You have to have something. You have to have some type of catalyst push her to that point.
Oh, I agree 100%. And I think, like, what else could it have been? Right. Like, because like the trailers kind of allude to the fact, and like all the different previews and stuff, like they allude to the fact that the Dinah girl dies at the beginning, right? Like, because like all of the marketing kind of pushed towards that,
right,
somewhat in a fake out way, because and then the other thing too, there's like a bunch of people who are like, oh well, the trailers for The Last of Us lied, and then it's like, okay, well, tell me a game trailer that was 100% truthful to you and wasn't in some way tricked. Like, go through the list.
And once you play the game, even if you have that type of perspective in your your psyche, and say, okay, things gonna be Dina that goes. When you play the game in the first hour and a half, and the way that they build up the relationship between Ellie and Dina, it's not as secure, or I wouldn't say in depth, as it would be as if Dina was to go. I would think Ellie would be upset, but she wouldn't be on this murder rage to go all the way to Seattle, track somebody down. Because at that point, Dina had just broke up with Jesse, so they were still kind of new.
Yeah, they literally point that out right away. Like the God, what was his name? The dude who was with Dinah. Oh yeah, Jesse. Duh. And then he's just like, oh man, moving on my girl like 2 days after it's over. You douche.
So yeah, you can see that, okay, they're new. So if Dina was to go, that's not strong enough emotion for Ellie to go 3-4 states away to track down some killers. Somebody of importance has to go. And the only obvious answer was Joel, unfortunately, at that point. But yeah, I think he had to go. I think it had to. That had to be the critical moment of why Ellie is on a rampage and went down a path that you never seen Ellie go. Because even when you remember, up to that point, the only parts of Ellie you play is her taking care of Joel in the winter episode of part 1, and then Left Behind. And so you really never seen Ellie in this warpath, monstrous role up until that moment she watched Joel die, and it was the beginning of a dark path, because at the end she gambled everything, and it was a bitter sweet end. I don't even know if you could say bittersweet, because if someone could watch it, like with Killbot, someone could watch that and only watch the scene where Joel dies and Ellie watch, and then get to the end and see Abby finally, Ellie finally letting Abby go, and say, well, hell, that was for nothing. She got mad, got upset. She went halfway around the country to track this person. She got her down, about to get her justice, and she let her go. What? Are you kidding me? Oh, fuck this game. I'm out. So, like, if you only saw those two scenes, you would feel as
yeah. I mean, and that's exactly the kind of argument that I've had with my friend Killbot about this. I'm just like, and I actually think I'm going to title the podcast this, like, context is king.
Right.
When we're talking about video games, especially when we're talking about video games. Because like let's take another example. What I'm trying to think of another big story game that you've probably played. You played the first Metal Gear Solid?
Yes.
Okay, you've played Metal Gear Solid 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take it this way. So if you only saw Metal Gear Solid 1's cutscene that showed the girl that you're trying to rescue getting murdered, right, and then you see a clone of Snake fighting Snake with a giant robot, like would that really like entice you to play the game? Or you'd probably just be like, what the fuck is this shit?
It's all on perspective, and optics. It's all on optics.
Yeah, for sure.
If you present it a certain way, some people are going to see it that way, even if that's not the intentions of the message that you're trying to put out. But it's the optics.
Well, and it's so funny because some people are saying, like, well, the story's the most important part, and it's like, okay, to some people, yes, but it's my opinion that if you are playing a game, everything is part of the story. All of the things you see, everything you experience, all of those different layers of the onion build to something that you can't get while reading a book or a movie or a comic book. You just can't get, there's only so much, emotion that you can get from scripted media. And yes, Last of Us is scripted to a large extent, more so than other games. However, finding extra data about the lives of the WLF or the Seraphites, or looking around this corner and hearing little dialogues and exchanges, or you experiencing, the fight or flight of fighting for your life or running from the Seraphites, or ducking around from clickers and stuff, like that is stuff that you cannot experience in a movie, or or a music, or a comic book, or a TV show. You just can't, because by the nature of music, of comic books, of TV shows and movies, they're all linear. And while The Last of Us tells a linear story, it does it in a fashion that allows you to paint in, let's say, like a coloring book. That allows you to paint in some of the coloring book. So at the end, even though, let's say you bought like a, Marvel Spider-Man coloring book, in the end, you painted it how you saw it and you experienced it and what you thought of in that exact moment.
Right.
And like another thing, that I saw, like, which I think was amazing and hilariously the best use of the touchpad, is the whole, like, how they have the real guitar thing in the game, and there's all these guitar moments that are just there to find, like did you find on your first playthrough, did you find when Ellie and Dinah were first in Seattle and they went to the guitar store?
In the music store?
Yeah, and Ellie did Take On Me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, tons of people miss that. You know, and it's a beautiful fucking moment.
It is.
Amazing song choice, obviously, but like what it meant in that moment as Ellie starts her revenge quest and like Dinah's interaction with her, you know, not everybody got that experience, you know? Like
Well,
that's the thing.
I think that should have been, because there are two moments where you encounter the guitar. You know, the first one was the music store scene. The second one is when you get to the theater. I think the theater one could have been optional, but I think that music store scene should have been placed in the story because that builds up even more of a backstory behind Joel and Ellie. You can see that as Ellie is singing and playing that song. Okay, that's one of the, because she could have owned couldn't have learned that song, but nobody but Joel, because that song is an old song.
Yeah,
you know, and,
for sure.
and it shows that Joel and her had, you know, a bond. He finally taught her how to play. I mean, you see the scene where he, you know, begins to teach her how to play, but you see that, okay, she learned that. That's something that's a part of her, a gift from Joel to her, and you see that love has been, you know, placed and will always be remembered in the teachings of how Joel, you know, showed her how to play the guitar, how he showed her how to swim, how he did these father-daughter things, you know. And that's the first time when you really see it, because I think that scene is even before the museum scene. I think that scene is, I don't even think you get to the museum scene until like day 2 or something. I think it's like day 2. So that's the first moment you see a connection of something passed down from parent to child.
Sure.
What was that? You know, and I think that should have been a permanent scene in the game. The second one you could have done without. You could have been optional, but I think that scene should have been placed because, like you said, so many people missed it. If you didn't go up to that room and check for supplies, you completely missed it. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just part of the way, you know, that games are. You know, games are a unique medium because games are the only thing, in my opinion, that can make you feel all of the other ways that the other mediums can make you feel, but at once. You know, like for me, for example, so like I played The Last of Us Part 2 at home on my PS4 Pro, my 65-inch 4K LG TV with my 5.1.2 surround sound system. Which I also appreciated, as a side note, that they allowed me to tell the game where my speaker placement was. You know, with their little circle. Like, I appreciated that a lot. Like, that was real good. I realized it was in the first game too, but I didn't have that then.
Right.
So
you get to embrace it all.
Yeah, so I got to embrace it all, you know, and much like how I played other games that came out this year, you know, like I cranked my fucking system up. And something for me that I think I appreciate even more than the first Last of Us, and this may be divisive for you because I know you're musically inclined, is I think that the music was better across the board in this game, and I loved that there was all of the sweet moments and stuff by returning series composer Gustav Sen's last name I'm gonna butcher, by Gustav or Gustavo Santa something, I don't know. I love that he handled like all of the sweet moments and stuff, because in the first game he handled everything. He handled combat, he handled ambience, he handled all that stuff. But I loved that the ambience and the combat music were handled by Mac McQuail. And that it was this raw, like dense, bassy, like you kind of felt like the heartbeat of whichever character you were playing, and just kind of and the pressure of like the very violent acts that happen in this game. And for me, like, I think the music like really knocked it out of the fucking park. And it was interesting because I didn't even know going into the game that they had two composers. And it's interesting because they only list Mac McQuail as additional composer. But yeah, it's interesting because like on the soundtrack, like all the action cues and like ambient cues are all Mac McQuail. And it's also completely ironic because me and Jessica are watching Mr. Robot, and he composed that show, and it has, I wouldn't say similar dark cues, but it's a very dark show as well.
You can see where the ingredients.
Yeah, you can see like Neil Druckmann was like, all right, we got to get this guy. I watched Mr. Robot. Like you can see where he's like, hey Sony, somebody find me this composer. I need him.
Well, I played this with headphones on, and so
did you make sure to set it to?
Yeah, buddy, and I'm gonna tell you, it's a whole different experience. You play that with headphones.
So it's funny. So when I thought I was finishing the game at the Seraphite town complex, whatever you want to call it, the last scene with Abby and her day 3, it was 11 o'clock at night, and I live with as many of our Fork family knows, I live with Brock, and he's got a 5-year-old, so I had to turn off my surround sound system and switch to headphones, and I switched headphones. So I played the whole Seraphite thing in headphones. So believe you me, like I know what the headphone experience is like as well, and it is fucking however many audio engineers they had on this game, it's masterful in whichever setup you got. Like, man, so good.
It's spectacular. It like to everything, to the background music, even to how the gun sound. When you shoot a revolver, it sounds totally different than shooting the regular Beretta or even the shotgun. You feel it and you hear it, and when you go into the like the one of the clips that I showed you when I was with Ellie. And getting to that hospital, you got to go through that abandoned. I don't even know what I think it was, abandoned office building, and you hear those clickers running around, and you hear that backdrop music. Man, it puts the fear of God in you. I'm gonna tell you, it puts the fear of God in you trying to get through that area, and it's like, oh my gosh, because you can hear not only the clickers running around, you can hear the moans and the groans of the human infected, and if you shoot one, you can hear them start running and coming at you, and it's just like, oh my gosh, your heart starts racing, and nothing is worse than trying to preserve bullets because you already low and you shot one and you're like, oh, yeah, I gotta get the hell out of here, But yeah, that's the sound quality. That's the best I've heard since Control. And
I haven't played Control, so it's got amazing sound.
Really, really amazing. I think it's underrated how good the sound quality is in that game. That game is incredible sound quality. And I played that game with headphones on as well, and it's spectacular. It's spectacular. It gives you that same eerie feeling, as if that unsettledness, as if when you're walking into any part, because the whole game is in, the FBC, the Federal Bureau of Control. That's no spoilers. That's just like the opening.
Yeah, and then they say that in the trailers that it takes place inside of a building, and the building's like alive or some shit.
It's alive, and it's a huge building. Don't even ask how. It's some parts inside the building where you're actually outside. I don't know how, but but you get this eerie feeling, an eerie, unsettling feeling the whole game. Like you never feel as if, okay, I can relax until you get to like certain parts. Like there's only 2 parts of the game where you have that hub world moment. But other than that, even in the save points, it's like you just don't know. Anything could happen. Anything could pop up. You go into these rooms and then they're of people chanting incantations, and it's just like, yo, what the heck? You just get goosebumps, you get chill bumps walking into the room, and it's like, wow.
I'll have to
those,
play. I'll have to play it one of these days. It's on my
really
list of.
good.
It's on my list of things to get.
It's really good. It might be on sale. I know.
I know it's been on sale on PlayStation, but I watch Digital Foundry stuff, and they've said like it. You know, it still runs like shit on PlayStation, and I have an Xbox One X, so I'm waiting for it to go on sale on the Xbox.
It might be. You know what? You might want to check Game Pass because it's on PlayStation now, so it might be on Game Pass.
Yeah, no, it's not on Game Pass. Okay. Believe me, we've been in quarantine. I've been checking Game Pass.
I know they just sent me a notification. They added some games on Game Pass. I gotta go in there and check and see what they got on there now. But yeah, that same feeling is what I got with playing with Ellie, or playing in these intense moments where you got to go through and fight through hell and back to get to your destination.
Speaking of hell and back and pandemic stuff, so I want to touch on the pandemic stuff in The Last of Us Part 2, and then also, since I live here, the Seattle stuff, which we talked about a couple weeks ago as one of the big things that I was super excited for, to see whether or not they were going to fuck it up or whether or not they were going to nail it. I mean, the long and short of that is mostly they get it. Mostly they get it.
Right.
There are a couple parts where I was like, all right, fuck you guys. This is not where this is. Why are we doing this? Why was this stuff earlier so good and this part's so bad? So it was up and down for me. It was up and down for me. I'll say this though, in terms of like the spirit of Seattle and some of its outlying areas, they definitely nailed. Like if you took like a screenshot of some dude in like suburbs or around the city or stuff, and you compared it to like a Last of Us screenshot, they'd be pretty fucking close. But some of that shit just ain't where some of that shit is.
Do you think they placed it just off the sake of recognition? Like, you got to put the stratosphere in there just for the fact that you see that.
You mean the Space Needle?
I mean, Space Needle, yeah. I don't know why
dare you call it the stratosphere. Fucking heathen.
Yeah.
I don't know, because that's actually the one that pisses me off the most, is the Space Needle. Right. Like in the end of part 3 there with Abby, you're going to the Seraphites Collective, and they say that they live on an island, right?
What?
And I'm thinking, they're saying they live on an island from the aquarium. Aquarium was pretty close. It's a lot bigger in the video game. The aquarium's pretty small in real life, just saying.
Okay.
I mean, and that Ferris wheel is there, but you sure as shit cannot see that Ferris wheel across the city like you could in Ellie's thing. I was like, all right, I see what you're doing here. It's just an icon in the distance to go for. Okay, sure. Right. Of course you can see it through these buildings. Sure. Okay, fine. Yeah, because like when you set off for that Ferris wheel as Ellie, I was like, okay, cool. We're on the docks, and I'm looking around. I'm looking at the skyline, and I was like, nah. No way. Nuh-uh. That Ferris wheel looks like the size of like the biggest building in the distance. And it's, right. I mean, it's a fucking Ferris wheel. Everybody knows what a Ferris wheel size is. Right. Like, it ain't that big.
Right.
But when they're like, they got a boat and they went over to the island. And so in my head, so when you say the island in Seattle, everybody knows you're talking about Bainbridge or possibly Mercer, which is smaller and to the east. Right. But like Bainbridge, it's like, you hear it throughout the game, and in my head I'm like, oh, they're on Bainbridge. Okay, across the water. Okay, they're west. Okay, yeah, they have to be on Bainbridge. And then like you finally get to the island, and in my head, and even looking back on like the coastline, like after Lev and Abby get there, I'm like, okay, yeah, we're on Bainbridge. This is Bainbridge Island, and you're going through, the Seraphite thing, and then there's suddenly like a lot of buildings, and then you can look up, and you're kind of like below the Space Needle, and I was like, brah. The Space Needle ain't on this fucking island, because Bainbridge is an island. Like the Space Needle is really more where in day one of Ellie's campaign, what they were calling Capitol Hill, like it's which wasn't Capitol Hill. It looked like Capitol Hill, but it's in the wrong area. You should have been able to see the Space Needle from that particular area in Ellie's campaign. And the fact that it's on this fucking island just randomly, I was like, not even after what would have been 24 years after the apocalypse, or no, it would have been more, right?
Longer than that,
because it was 20 years from the start of Last of Us, and then another 4 years, right, from Last of Us 1, Last of Us 2. So it would have been 24 years. I was like, bro, not even after 24 years would this tiny area of Seattle somehow be turned into a giant island with like these buildings here, and I just wasn't having it. I was so upset. I was like, where are all these fucking trees coming from? I was like, I understand overgrowth, but there ain't these fucking trees over here by the Space Needle. There ain't these. This is fucking. I was like, God damn it, Naughty Dog. Why you do me so right and then you do me so dirty?
You think it was like a moment where, they were like, oh crap, we gotta put the Space Needle in. That represents Seattle. Like that's the first thing you think of when you think of Seattle. We gotta find a way to put this in. Let's just put it here.
This is digging up my infamous Second Son rant, which famously has the Space Needle on the cover and is supposed to be quote unquote set in Seattle, even though it absolutely is not, because it takes place on 3 fucking islands. Seattle is, it's a fucking coastal town, like fucking like San Francisco or something. Like it's not an island. Like I don't know why people think it's an island. Like I feel like so I know from Infamous Second Son and behind the scenes on that. So apparently the Space Needle is still privately owned, even though it's like probably the most iconic thing in Seattle. And I know that basically on Second Son, even though the developer is in Bellevue, which is like 2 miles away across a bridge to Seattle, that they couldn't get a lot of the rights for Seattle, and the Seattle change actually happened late into the development cycle, and it was going to be called a city called Seaport, because Infamous has in the other games always been in a fictional city. So I know that the Seattle stuff in the game came super late into the development cycle.
Okay.
So like I think in their mind it was like, oh, we're just gonna do kind of like our take on Seattle and keep it real gameplay focused, because the city is very tight in Infamous Second Son. Now for Last of Us, which has a much bigger budget, and they're out of Santa Barbara, I think.
I believe it's somewhere in California. I can't remember Santa Barbara or
Santa Cruz. They're out of something Santa, I think.
Mm-hmm.
In Naughty Dog.
It might be Santa Barbara.
And so like when we get to day 1 of Ellie's campaign and we roll into Seattle and we're on I-5, and I'm just like, and I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, I know exactly where this is. There ain't no trees here. This is fucking part of the city. Like even 24 years after overgrowth and stuff, there wouldn't be trees like this. Like, so I was like, okay, well, that's kind of fucked up. But then you get to the open roam area. Now, the open roam area, the first one there, right? That's actually pretty fucking spot on. Like, that was like, in fact, it was so spot on. Like, I was having arguments with Jessica. Like, I was like, oh, I don't think this building was here. And Jessica's like, you're full of shit. It's totally there.
But
You
you gotta
know,
also remember when the game was developed. It
yeah,
might
that's
not have been
true.
it.
It's been years. It's been years.
Right.
You know, and so I would actually like as supplemental to my Last of Us playthrough or Last of Us Part 2, like I'd be looking on Ellie's map, comparing it with the real map, going
Mm-hmm.
into the 3D building view to try to see where I was.
Like this isn't here. I knew this wasn't here. I
Yeah.
told you this wasn't here.
No, in this case, she was right. I was wrong. So like that first open roam area is pretty much 100% accurate. Like it was really cool actually. And then I was like, oh, this like the building that's like downed, and you have like a thing with Dinah. Dinah's like, well, how far are you gonna go on this thing? And then
Right.
that's right above the bank. Did you go into the bank in the open area?
Yeah, I went in all of them because I
Okay,
wanted to get
cool.
the trophy.
Yeah,
The
cool,
first one.
cool,
So
cool,
I
cool.
went to it.
Yeah, so that like fallen building like above the bank, like I've put doors in there because it's like it's the second tallest building in Seattle
Oh,
actually. Um, so I've been in that building, so I was like, oh man, like this is that building. Oh, I can see the architecture. Oh, it fell down. I was like, oh man, that reminds me of like 6 years ago when I put some doors in at the very top floor and I looked out over the whole city, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm afraid of heights.
right.
I was like, take that building. It's destroyed now. Suck it.
Right. Right.
so so yeah, and then the other thing that's obvious, like, and most people I think know this, that we are the home of Starbucks. Starbucks started here. It's Starbucks capital fucking of the world. There's
Mm-hmm.
like two Starbucks on every corner. And they had what did they have? They had like Johnny's Roaster or something, and you could clearly
Right.
tell it was kind of like they couldn't get the Starbucks licensing, but their cafes looked like Starbucks's, and they had the
Right.
the little round logo, and I was like, okay, these
Right.
are Starbucks's.
Right. Right. Like I know what's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right.
So in terms of their Seattle accurateness, if you do live in Washington, it's accurate some of the time. Like another thing, like the convention center, when you first go into the convention center,
Mm-hmm.
which was right before that part you're talking about with the oh, what do they call them? The clickers that run away from you and are assholes.
Yeah. Right. Like the
Yeah,
scatterers or something like that. I can't. Yeah, I
scatters,
remember Ellie,
scritters,
but I can't
something.
remember their name.
Yeah, they suck.
Yeah. They're like,
Like,
and yeah.
so like that first and I'm super familiar with the convention center. I've been there a lot. And so like the first opening area of the convention center, I was like, oh my god, this is the convention center. Oh my god, this is great. I'm gonna fight fucking clickers like where I've been to PAX,
Mm-hmm.
like this is gonna be great. And then suddenly you turn the corner, and then it's not the convention center no more, and you're in like some quote unquote office building, like you were talking about fighting clickers. And I was like, okay, this ain't right.
This is
So,
not Robbie.
you know, I won't say it detracted from my experience like it did on Second Son, Infamous Second Son.
Right.
Um so like it was one of those things of like, I think they probably got Seattle better than all the other games that quote unquote take place in Seattle, or there's a level in Seattle or something like that.
Right.
Um but just like it would really be like that for me. I'd be like, oh man, oh shit, I've been here, this is so cool,
Right.
oh shit. And then you turn the corner, and then it's like, oh, this is not right. And then you turn the corner again, and you'll be like, oh my god, this is so cool, oh my god, this is the aquarium. And then it's like, oh man, I don't remember the aquarium being that big. Like, nah.
Right.
So like that's kind of how it was for me, the entire experience for me. So like a jerk, like when we get to the end and at Santa Barbara, I was like, I haven't been to Santa Barbara, I don't know what it's like. I hope they got it wrong,
Right.
just for the Santa Barbara people. Like that's what I thought. Like that's what I thought.
I would hope they nailed it if they're like literally in Santa Barbara or Santa Monica. Like I would hope they got that right.
Yeah, see, but me, I was like, man, I know they probably live here, but I hope they got it wrong just to fucking make us Seattle people feel better. Like that's what I thought.
Like, you need to feel our pain. You need to feel our pain.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I
I
guess
would tell you,
city design still a city design winner in a video game has to still go to Ubisoft.
yeah, I would say if they make a Division 3 and they put it out in Seattle, they're gonna get it right. Ubisoft, let me tell you something. Ubisoft is gonna do your city. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
they're gonna get it right to the fact that you might be even walking in and say, I know that pothole. I wrecked my car in that pothole. They're gonna nail it. They're gonna nail it. But even like with the Division 2, and it's done here.
Mm-hmm.
The other Washington D.C.
Mm-hmm.
There's still some things that are inaccurate only for the fact that when they developed the game and when they probably took pictures and when they probably redesigned the game at a certain point in time, that building was there that's no longer there. Like when you go down
Sure.
to Gallery Place and you're going toward the now Capital One Arena, I still call it the Verizon Center.
Oh shit! That actually. Oh shit! Oops.
oh, oh.
Let me just bash my my side of my giant screen filter here. That reminds me of one more Seattle thing. I'll stop talking about Seattle on Last of Us Spoilercast. When you're fighting Tommy,
Right.
and that viaduct is there because that viaduct got tore down years ago because we've got a tunnel now.
Mm-hmm.
So that viaduct was actually super accurate. I was like, oh my god, I've been stuck in traffic for hours on this fucking thing. But
I get to witness it again.
well, and it was and I'm saying it from like a like Naughty Dog got it right kind of thing. Like one, it looked like the viaduct and stuff and felt like the viaduct, but also because like in my head I was like, well, this viaduct doesn't exist anymore. It got tore down years ago. But then in my head I was like, oh wait a minute. But the world ended for these characters 24 years ago, so the viaduct would still be there. And I was like, oh, okay, Naughty Dog, you did good here. You did good here, So
I see what you're doing.
yeah,
I see what you're doing.
yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. But like I said, I think that will play a part of the experience to an extent for a person that's native to the city that the game is being developed on. Probably from the outside looking in. Like for me, I've only been to Seattle one time, so I wouldn't know exactly where everything is. But I would know certain familiarities, of, like you said, the Space Needle. Now, I've only been to Seattle once, but I also know that needle is not on no island. I didn't know
good. Good.
So that was like, I was looking, I was like, I don't think that belongs there.
Yeah.
But okay,
yeah.
Sure. But I did notice that. But I think for the person outside looking in, they're gonna be like, okay, oh, it's a Space Needle, but they're mainly there for the story.
Yeah,
they're not gonna have that connection. Like for me, like I said, we played the Division, and you like, oh, I asked you where are you? Like, I don't know about this department store downtown.
Yeah, and you're like, I got you.
Right, I know. Okay, you're in Metro Center. You're at the biggest Macy's. So I know exactly what it. But it's just it's to each his own.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. But speaking of, like, you went back to you're afraid of heights. But speaking of heights, I guess we're gonna go right. I guess in the Abby's part. How did you feel about the part when you had to follow Lev high up into the heavens to get to the hospital?
I mean, I didn't mind that so much. Okay. Like from a gameplay perspective or like a story perspective.
I guess from a gameplay perspective, because as you know, like in her character field, she also is afraid of heights. She has vertigo, and so they play on that.
Yeah.
The higher up you go, like this, you almost see the camera zoom out, like, oh crap, vertigo's kicking in, and it gets to a part where I guess for me, where I'm on the catwalk walking over. Not the first one, but the second one. Like when she finally gets over, because if you're controlling her, it's not secure. So as you're controlling her and you're trying to move that analog stick forward, you can see her kind of wobble to the left and the right, and like, oh, in my mind, like, oh shit. Now a little bit of that feeling starting to kick in, where I know, okay, I'm not 300 feet up in the air, but I'm starting to feel like I'm 300 feet up in the air.
So for me, like, I don't get like vertigo in video games if I'm in the third person. Like, if that had been a first person like thing, I would have been a little like, I'm gonna stay here on this nice safe platform for a minute.
and that's funny because that's what she did. She was like, she looked at her like, I can't do this.
Yeah,
I can't do it.
Yeah. I mean, I liked the gameplay a lot in that area. I think that was the one time, and at that specific moment when I was playing Abby, that I thought, like, you know, I kind of wish this was happening with Ellie, and Ellie was the one getting all this interesting information from Lev. Right. And I mean, let's just talk about the Lev and Abby relationship for a minute. Like, I think that relationship's actually really cool. I think that, you know, Abby, who's already like on the outside of the WLF, is fascinating because she's really the last Firefly. You know, right. She's really the last one who kind of believed the way the Fireflies did because of what was her name, Nadine, and because of her dad. You know.
Oh, Marlene.
Or Marlene. No, I'm thinking. Yeah, I'm thinking of the other character that Laura Bailey plays.
Yeah, no, she looks like Nadine Ross from Uncharted, though.
Yeah,
she does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think it's interesting that, you know, she's obviously risen the ranks in the WLF, right? Because, like, when you're walking around the WLF camps, everybody knows her. Some people are a little afraid of her, you know. Right. And it's interesting that, you know, Abby gets caught by the Seraphites, and then, you know, and she's hung up with other Seraphites, whom she then saves out of, like, pure survival instinct, right? Right. And then, like, I loved that scene where you're I call it the Metroid moment, where you're stripped out of all your gear, and you're fighting that, like, huge honking chick with the braid and the pickaxe, which I lost to. I lost to several times, and you just get, like, the pickaxe in the eyeball. I was like, ooh, shit.
It's because her attacks are so slow, and you're anticipating, and you're moving so quick that if you dodge, you've already lost the time that you can dodge again, and that's when she gets you.
Yeah, exactly. So I loved that, you know, and then, like, Abby and Lev and Lev's sister, you know, they go into, you know, like, they get saved, they're hunted by the Seraphites, and then they're hunted by the WLF, you know, and then the sister's gonna die, but Abby's not gonna let this person die because, you know, as hardcore as Abby is as a character, like, she draws the line with, like, well, if you save my life, it seems like, right? Right. And then you go on that, like, crazy journey across the rooftops to get to the hospital, you know, and, like, even though I understood why Abby was there and Lev was there guiding Abby across these rooftops, which actually made some sense to me, that, like, some logical sense that, like, okay, well, yeah, the reason the Seraphites have gone undetected is because they've got this crazy system on the roofs. Right. And there actually are, like, a fuck ton of cranes in Seattle. So I could see, like, the way the cranes kind of crash together and stuff. I was like, oh yeah, you could probably make a bridge across Seattle because there's, like, always cranes everywhere. And I was like, okay, that seems kind of believable to me. Like, the thing that was kind of unbelievable was, like, I was like, I don't know how the fuck they got all this wood up up on these fucking things. I was like, fucking Seraphites are fucking, they're they're like beavers or
Hell,
woodchucks or
that's tough as
something. Like
hell.
they're crazy. So,
Yeah.
you know, like I liked that, you know, and I liked that there was all those little moments, again, missable moments where like Abby could be like, "Ah, that's your," I forget what they called the chicks, the savior chick of the Seraphites. They're like prophet or
I
whatever.
you talking about the main leader of the Seraphites?
Yeah, the
And I
one
want to say
the
exactly
like kind of like Mary, like Mother Mary kind of statue looking chick.
yeah, I didn't even know her name, to be honest. And I wish that there was more I could have learned of the Seraphites, because out of all of the factions, I think they were the most intriguing because they were the least that I knew about.
True.
I thought I was going to know more about that on Abby's side, but I didn't. It was still mysterious. You know, like their leader was mysterious. Why did they follow her? What was she? She was trying to teach. Obviously, she was trying to teach. Um, it was more on a religious side, you know. But I didn't know.
Yeah,
I wish I knew more about them.
yeah, I think it was definitely very interesting, and I think the more you learned about the Seraphites, you know, like it was interesting because I remember hearing stuff when you get to like sort of the Seraphite camps about how Lev was talking about how um the original chick who founded the Seraphites or whatever, like she died. And then
Right.
there was like this other dude who like took over, and Lev was like, well, he twisted a bunch of her teachings. And then I was like, oh, interesting, you know? And and it was very interesting too because like retrospectively, like I never got that the the actress who plays Lev is like a real life trans person.
Oh wow, I didn't
And
know that either.
and so I didn't know that going in. So my perspective on, you know, the Lev and Abby story was like, you know, I didn't realize that Lev was an allegory for you know, transitioning or being part of the trans
Hmm.
community and what hatred comes of when you make that choice, you know, from your family
I
members.
I kind of had a feeling because even by the voice, that was my first trigger, right? Like by the voice, and I was like, I think that this is a girl,
Mm-hmm.
but because like, but as you know, it's a child, so it's hard to kind of distinguish because I think Lev is supposed to be what 13 years old,
Yeah.
so he's actually younger than what Ellie was when she met Joel.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, this is a kid, you know. But once they insinuated with we had to run away because I cut my hair, I kind of put two and two together and said, okay, I see where Naughty Dog is going on this route. You know, and then they started to open up more and more about why um, Lev and his sister, why they fled. You know, it's because of they wanted tradition. They wanted Lev to follow tradition and to live a certain way and to be a certain lifestyle, and that just wasn't for him. You know, it wasn't what he wanted. You know, he didn't want to live
Yeah.
that.
Cause like the way I interpreted it as it was presented to me was this is just like a kid who
Right.
didn't, you know, initially I thought, I learned later that it was really the opposite of what I was thinking of. Like initially I was like, oh, this is just a kid who wanted to shave his head, um but because of Seraphite culture that is like so forbidden, like we're gonna kill you forbidden. And I was like, that's fucked up, you know.
Right.
But then that script was flipped when it was just kind of like, well, you know, she didn't want to, or he, I'm confused. Like that she didn't want to be married off to like one of these elders, because I don't know about you, but I got a little bit of that kind of like, well, when you're 13 you're married off to these elders to be like their fucking sex slaves,
Right.
you know. And then I was like, oh, that's fucked up. And so she cut her hair as an act of rebellion
Right.
to that, and I was just like, oh damn, you know? And
Well,
so it was interesting that in the behind the scenes of Neil Druckmann, he had a very succinct thing to say about that, you know, and it was just that he, I guess, had a family member that transitioned, and he wanted to tell a trans story without it being about trans, even though he casted a trans person to play Lev.
right.
And I thought that was really interesting, because I don't know, just like for me, like personally, like I've known some people who have transitioned and stuff like that. And I think for me, just as a storyteller, just as strictly as a storyteller, it is a fascinating topic to dive into. And I applaud that Neil did a story about that I didn't even know was really about that. Like I maybe thought a couple of times, like, is this a boy? Is this a girl? Is this a trans thing?
Right.
You
because
know?
it's hard to tell throughout the duration until they finally open up and say, this is why they left.
Well, and I think that's kind of the beauty of that kind of, I wouldn't even really say Lev is a subplot. Lev is like, you know, as a main, Lev is Abby's Ellie, you know?
That's exactly what he is.
And Abby has done all these horrible things and stuff, and continue to do horrible things, because Abby ultimately is a Joel.
Right.
You know? And I think that's something that a lot of people who dislike the game missed. You know?
I think they missed that with Abby because of the cloud that hung over their head just off the fact that you killed Joel.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people couldn't get over that. You killed Joel. I don't care. And so there are people that felt that is. I understand where you're going, Naughty Dog. I see that you want me to like her because you want me to understand that she's not a bad person. She was just upset with Joel for doing what he did, you know. But I don't care. You know, there's some people who's just like, I don't care. I want to be Ellie, and I want this girl taken out, especially like at the point where you're playing on Ellie's perspective, and you get all the way to day 3, and you think the game. This is the first time you think the game is over at an end.
Yeah, that's true. I totally did too.
Yeah, you know, and she busts through the door, gun to Tommy's head, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm sick of this girl. She got to die. You know, and, so, and then boom, that's when it switches. And
when you switch to Abby for the well, not the first time because that's in the very beginning of the game, but when you switch to Abby for basically the next 8 fucking hours,
right.
Were you pissed?
Initially, yes.
Okay.
Because she was at that point, she was just like this annoyance that just. It's almost like being outside, eating food outside of the restaurant, and you just have this one fly just maneuvering around your table and only your table, and nobody else is there. And everyone has food. Like, why are you at my table? And you're trying to kill it, and you just can't kill it, and it just linger around. And that's the feeling that I had where Abby was like, I've got to do everybody to get to you. You're the main person that I want, and you just keep ruining everything. And I can't kill you, and I hate it for it. And then at that crux and that pinnacle moment, that's when Druckmann and Naughty Dog just say, "Boom, we're gonna switch, and now you're gonna play the person you hate, and this is where we're gonna show you why we want you to play the person that you despise so much." And so, the initial, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to play as her. Why am I her?" But it's to to give resolution to why Abby felt the way she felt toward Joel, and you see them trying to build up, she's with her dad. Oh, this dad is like this fun, carefree, jubilant, almost juvenile, type of person. As you can see him just, moseying, walking through the woods. You almost see as Abby being the more responsible one. Like, Dad, we can't. Everyone's looking for you, Dad. We can't just keep doing this all the time. and he's just like walking through nature and just having the time. It's like almost like a carefree as like how Goku is with like just his personality and his nature. And you see that they have this bond relationship. He was a fun-loving guy, and then he sees a relationship between Abby and Owen at the beginning, and he's not like that dad, that overprotective dad that says, "Oh, don't date my daughter," that and the third. He sees that you happy with him, be happy, and this and the third. Like, oh, he's a good guy, and they build that up, and to see Joe kill him. But they don't really show you kill him. You actually do it in the first one.
Yeah, that's true. You pull the trigger in the first one.
Right. I'm gonna come back to later on.
Mm-hmm.
And to see that, it didn't have the same effect on me as Ellie and Joe, only for the fact that I didn't spend 15 hours with Abby and her dad. I spent 15 hours with Ellie and Joe. Mm-hmm. So when I saw, not to say that one death is worse than the other, but it didn't impact me as much as when Abby found out her father died, as when Joe died in front of Ellie. But it gave me closure to why Abby felt the way she felt, and why she traveled all the way from Seattle to Wyoming to gun this man down. In this case, beat him down with a golf club. But it's almost as if, and Naughty Dog does this throughout the whole duration of The Last of Us 2. They start off by painting this terror, this image of a person or a faction to make you despise them, but then they show you the other side and try to show you a perspective that they're not this bad thing that you think they are. Like they do it with Abby, they did it again with the WLF, they did it again with the Seraphites. They do that continuously throughout the game, and I found that interesting. But
I think something interesting that Neil Druckmann said in his recent interviews, because a lot of people have painted it as like, we get it, violence is bad and revenge never leads to anything good. And he was saying that that's not his perspective on it. His perspective is nobody is good and evil. People are only good and evil in moments. And I was like, actually, yeah, that makes more sense once you played the game. In
that moment, yeah, he tries to say, yeah, just because you've done bad things, it doesn't make you a bad person. Like I said, I get it. At that point in time, playing as Abby, I could have been fine with just understanding the resolution of why she felt the way she felt, and you see that, Abby isn't really a bad person. She just wanted revenge, like Ellie revenge. But neither one of them are really bad people. But at that point, it was just that I didn't care, until I obviously played more into the game, and I understood Abby a little bit more, which kind of goes into, I guess we could talk about that a little later on, but the execution of how the story was told, I think I could have felt a little more maybe understanding or maybe empathy on Abby's side had it been displayed or illustrated differently than how they illustrated it throughout the game. But like I said, we could touch on that a little further after this. But yeah, that was my initial reaction. At first, I didn't want to play as Abby, because I was upset. I was confused, man, But,
yeah, when I first switched to Abby, and you see the WLF, and you see their lives, and they're just, they're the same as Jackson. They're doing the same thing. They're just in a shittier place.
I don't know. That stadium was pretty good. That stadium looked hella good, man. They had a lot of stuff.
Yeah, No, they had fucking kids and pregnant people and stuff and all that sort of stuff. Which, by the way, on Neil Druckmann's part, I thought it was brilliant that they took the the baseball and the football stadiums that are real places in Seattle, and that's their like
Mm-hmm.
base of operations. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess that would make sense. And
Mm-hmm.
then the football stadium is actually where you start in the double F, and it's opened up, and then they're growing crops and stuff there. And I was like, oh yeah, yeah, you would totally do that with a stadium. I was like, okay,
So the Mar-
cool,
so the
yeah.
Mariners and the Seahawks play in the same area. I didn't know that.
No, 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 no,
I thought the Seahawks had a different stadium.
no, no. There's two stadiums. I was saying the
Okay.
WLF is in two stadiums, and you start off in the football stadium.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Because we're the ones who had that crazy baseball stadium that's got the cover that rolls over
Right.
the top and doesn't actually protect you from the rain. Uh, that's a true story though. They built it too tall, so with the amount of rain we get here, when the stadium cover comes over on the baseball field, because of the wind,
Right.
everybody in the
So
bleachers gets soaked anyways.
I will say they nailed that. I will say they nailed that. Like it rained a lot
Oh
back in.
yeah, man,
Oh my God.
that's another touch that I love about. And honestly, Naughty Dog had great rain in the first Last of Us, for that matter.
Yeah.
But man, the rain effects in Last of Us Part Two were perfect. And I'm one of those weird Washington people who actually loves the rain. I mean, I don't like being cold in the rain. I don't think anybody likes being cold in the rain. But like, I just love the way it looks. you
Mhm.
know and like I've been a few places, like I've been Caribbean, I've been around the United States and stuff like that, and Alaska and places in Canada. And the one thing that I love about Washington, and actually Hawaii for that matter, is like when it rains there, like it's its own character, compared to
Mhm.
other places. Usually like other places, like they just like make it, like drearier or something like that. But
Right.
like in Washington, because of our forests and our trees everywhere, and the way our gutters are set up, and the way our streets are set up, like it to me looks like it's alive, and something that Naughty Dog did so good. Like the thing that stands out to me was the water on like a piece of glass a on a wrecked car. Like it
Right.
looked so fucking good, you know.
Mhm.
Because like I already knew from Uncharted 4 that they had water on like clothes and characters like down, because you get wet a lot
Right.
in Uncharted 4,
Right.
but just like the soakedness of the clothes, particularly how the clothes looked, like man,
I
their rain effects are amazing.
I was impressed after the fact that there's certain parts in the game, like while it's raining and you're playing as Ellie, she would put her hood up and start walking distance,
Oh
as if
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was
you
cool
know.
too.
Yeah, like little things like that. That's what Naughty Dog nailed. That's what I really love about Naughty Dog. Those little small details,
Yeah,
characteristics like that. They nail that perfectly. And it's like, wow. To
yeah.
notice something of that statue.
And in like
Uh,
comparison to like Last of Us One to Last of Us Part Two, there's like 100 little details in any given
hmm
scene in Last
hmm
of Us One, but in Part Two, there's like 10,000 little details.
Right. And you
There's
notice
little
them.
birds, there's rabbits, running around, like the way water cascaded and stuff around things, and you know, just a lot of little really cool things.
And
Um,
at some part, I think after I think it's raining and it stops and you see like a rainbow,
mhm.
at one part of the game. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. That's really, really cool. Um,
Yeah, I mean, and that's definitely indicative of the Pacific Northwest life, because like it rains a lot, but it's not raining. It's not usually raining 24/7. Like it just rains often. You know,
mhm.
and so like the clouds move a lot. Because there's like a lot of wind coming off of the coast here, and so it'll be raining. Then maybe have a patch of sun. And boom, rainbow. We get rainbows all the time up here. You know.
Yeah.
So when you realize that, because I don't know, for me I realized that like Owen and the pregnant lady and Ellie murdering them was bad was in, I think, part 2 of Abby's story, when we've got Lev's sister in the aquarium, and they're at the aquarium, and you're just like, oh, it's raining. Ellie's like right around the corner about to murder these people.
Right.
Like, so I think for me, and this goes as a whole on the story, I ended up caring more about the side characters all around Abby's life than Abby. That's how I felt about that. How did you feel about that?
This is where we differ, and this is where we differ. This is where I'm going to go into the storytelling and how it was executed. After I knocked off my hit list with Ellie, I didn't care about the side characters, because in my mind, my justice was served with them. I didn't care about Owen. I didn't care about Mel. I didn't care about Lena. I just wanted to get my revenge and work my way up to the chain to finally get to Abby and finally put her out of her misery. That was all I wanted.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, they were all in that room, Manny as well, and I forgot the other guy. The first one you kill when you and Dana get kidnapped, when they blow up your horse.
Mm-hmm.
And once I knocked them all off, actually you don't kill Manny, Tommy kills Manny. But after I knocked them all off, I was done. I was fine, and that's where I go back and say, had you would have just gave me day one of Abby and showed me the resolution of why she felt, I could have been done with that, and you just pushed me to the end where they're fighting in the theater and then go to Santa Monica, and boom, that could have been the game for me. I would have been completely fine.
Okay.
But I think that if instead of making me play day 1 through 3 as Ellie and then turn around and make me play day 1 through 3 as Abby, I think had they would have shifted between the characters,
you think if they'd done day 1 Ellie, day 1 Abby, day 2 Ellie, day 2.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think had they would have executed the story that way, I think 2 things would have happened. I think 1, the game wouldn't have felt so dragged on.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think at a certain part, the game just felt like, oh my gosh, let me just get through this so I can find out, what happens. And then you get through the first quote unquote fake ending, and then you get to the second quote unquote fake ending, and then you find.
I love how you call them fake ends.
Right. And it's like, oh gosh, and so I think that would have lessened the blow on the game feeling longer than what it was. And then 2, it would have made me build some camaraderie or some care about the side, about the supporting cast. Because at that point in time, like I said, after I killed them, that was it. I didn't care. I didn't care about the relationship her and Owen had. I didn't care about the fact that Owen is, juggling between Abby and his wife Mel, and he's about to have a kid. I didn't care about Lena. I didn't care about Manny and the relationship he had with his dad and all. I didn't care. They were done at that point. Once I got my justice served with Ellie, it is what it was. I think had you would have shifted, had me play back to, Ellie to Abby, then I could have seen and cared more. Okay, Abby is not as bad as we think she is. She just was the victim and wanted revenge for something that she felt was taken from her, and then I would have, even felt more of an understanding and probably could have seen it clearer that, okay, at a certain part, Abby and Ellie are the same person. It's just that Ellie is the result of how Abby was when something was taken from them. Abby felt her father was taken from her by Joe, and so she retaliated, and now Ellie feels how Abby does because she feels her father was taken from her. And so they're literally parallel of each other.
Of course.
And I could have felt that more had you would have shifted me between the 2 characters as the days gone, and then you would have built up to finally, this is day 3, boom, they are going hand in hand, at it face to face. They got it, it's like Neo and Agent Smith going at it. You could. It was scary to see that at one point, like, oh shit, I'm about to kill Ellie.
Yeah, I was trying to get to that point. So when you got to the end of day 3 and it didn't take you back to Ellie, like
oh
how did you feel?
oh man, I was like, is this it? Am I about to? At one point I was like, damn, am I really about to kill Ellie? But at the same thought, I was like, oh well, I got to go through the story. I got to figure out what happened.
Oh, for sure.
And so like I'm doing this because I want to, to see what goes on at the end. But I damn sure I don't want to kill Ellie, man. I think I died maybe about 3 or 4 times, but I just couldn't. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's hard, man. And I thought Tommy died. I thought.
Oh yeah, I 100% thought that as well. Like having seen the scene a couple times now, you see that it's kind of an eye shot,
Right.
and probably the bullet like rolled around the skull, did that thing that it does sometimes that we know happens occasionally.
Well, especially after seeing that, they just, and it's one thing I would say about Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog pulled the Game of Thrones card. They have no fear, and in any given time, they would take out a character that you may start to develop feelings for or care about. They just wipe them off the face of the planet with no ounce of sleep loss. Like how they just took Jesse out, just like boom.
Yeah, man, that was like savage. Just right, like you're like do bam.
Right. And
then Tommy, bam, and you're just like, oh right. Shit,
and that's why. Oh shit, Tommy's gone too.
Yeah.
Wow.
You're like, oh man.
And at that point, and which is a great buildup because you thought, okay, if Naughty Dog has no problem outing Jesse and Tommy, I think they're going to make me do away with Ellie. I think this is it. And then once you find out that you stop and Ellie is feared and she goes to Dina and I'm like, oh man, she about to kill Dina.
Yeah,
and
right.
She had no problem.
Yeah, and she's like, oh, she's pregnant, and then Abby's like, good.
Right. At that point, it's like you took more something from mine. I'm taking something from you, and it's happening all over again.
Yep.
Between Joel being killed and Abby's father being killed. It's like, wow, these two are on. They're an immovable object facing, something you can't stop. So it's like it was powerful. It was powerful.
I mean, when you're fighting Ellie, first of all, I was like, oh shit, Ellie's scary to fight. Like it's like fighting right. Tommy. It's like, oh man, is this what it's like to be an NPC? Shit.
Right.
Right. And I definitely had hesitation in firing my trigger at Ellie. And definitely let Abby die many times, and Ellie killing her, and I was like, okay, good, roll credits. Right. That's what I thought initially, right? The other thing I thought when I was fighting Ellie was something I've only ever experienced in one other video game before, and it was actually in Splinter Cell Conviction in the co-op campaign, actually. Did you ever play Splinter Cells at all?
I played 2, and I played what is that? The Rogue Agent, Double Agent.
Yeah, Double Agent.
Double Agent. Yeah, I played those 2. I played a little bit of 1, but I actually own 2 in Double Agent, and I didn't play. I've seen my cousin play Conviction. It looked pretty good actually.
Yeah, Conviction is solid. Some people didn't like it because the gameplay mechanics were pretty changed from the previous 4 games.
It didn't look as stealthy either.
The thing is it can be. You just have to play it that way. But anyway, I only bring up that game because Conviction has a co-op campaign, and like a full, like it can be a split screen or it can be online. I personally played online with a friend of mine called Matt, and the co-op, and they had co-op in a couple of the Splinter Cell games before, and it had some story to it, but it was kind of light, But in Conviction, it has like a true, like it has just as expansive a story as the main game. And you play as, an American third echelon agent, and then another, a Russian agent from like whatever the Russian equivalent of third echelon is, right? And this is spoilers for that game, by the way, folks, but that game's been out for like 12 years, so Get over
my God.
it. It's on 360. Come on.
Right.
And so you go through the co-op campaign, and so I personally was playing as the American agent. And what I didn't know the whole time, and I played in on Xbox Live, so I didn't see my friend's screen. And what I didn't know the whole time in co-op is that the Russian agent gets secondary objectives to complete for Mother Russia. And at the very end of the game, like you kill this bad guy. It's like this cool story moment. And then there's like a cargo plane that like comes and picks you up. And like we're sailing away, and I'm thinking, okay, cool, we're at the end of the co-op game. We did it. We, stopped a nuclear thing happening, and you're in this cargo plane. And what I didn't know the whole time I've been playing, I had several hours playing with a buddy of mine, and to his credit, he kept it secret. He gets an order on his comms that I don't hear to eliminate me. And then I hear on my comms that the Russian agent's been compromised and my orders are to eliminate him. And the final boss in Splinter Cell Co-op Conviction is my friend, my literal friend that I've been playing in co-op with the whole fucking time.
That's a hell of a twist.
I was blown away because like the HUD comes back up out of the cutscene. He's on one end of the plane, I'm on the other, and I don't see him, my little co-op tag on him anymore on my screen. I was like, oh shit. And I hear on the comm, I was like, did you just get an order to kill me? And he's like, I did. And I'm like, oh shit. And I was like, I got an order to kill you. And then he says, to his credit, he's like, I've had secret things that I only get to do that you don't see on your objective screen that I'm completing for my agency. And I was like, what? And then like we're talking to each other, like we're not fighting each other. And he's just like, he's like, oh yeah, that hard drive that we went to drop off, after you dropped it off, my objective was to like go back and steal it and then give it to a different guy, because it goes to like a whole thing, like this whole like double, like this whole time he's been double crossing me, because that's what the game wants you to do, right? And so the end, we're fighting each other for real. And I was like, you fucking lying. Like, I was so pissed, but it was so cool at the same moment, And it was just like, what the fuck? I've never experienced anything like that, where there's this betrayal of a character that I love. And I had hesitation shooting my own friend, even though it's, a co-op video game, so the fight between Abby and Ellie made me feel that again, because it was similar too. It was like a dark kind of red thing in the cargo plane. It was a dark theater stage. There was cover, and and like fighting Ellie was just like, for me, like when I was fighting my friend, because it's like, well, he's got thermal vision, he's got night vision, he's got like foot tracking technology, he's got all these gadgets, and we're using them against each other. And it was just like, holy shit,
But like that, actually, that's incredible.
Yeah, it is. Well, and what's more incredible is the story actually, it has two different endings depending on whether the American agent wins or the Russian agent wins, which is crazy. So
that, you know what? The beauty of that is it works if the other person shuts the fuck up and just doesn't say anything.
Right, and he did, that little son of a bitch.
Yeah, you gotta like, it only works in that moment, because if he's playing and he's like, oh, it told me I gotta like do this, then it's like, oh, the experience is ruined, because oh, you're trying to double cross me, huh? Well, okay.
Yeah.
So but if you didn't say anything and you kept that a secret, that's what and it builds up to the experience of it, that you felt this heartbreak and this and this, like, yo, we're supposed to be on the same team. You felt this ultimate betrayal, and that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite video game moments for sure. And obviously they can't do it again, because if they did it again, it'd be like, all right, we're gonna kill each other at the end.
Right.
It's one trick pony, I guess.
Right. I think that would have been dope on Naughty Dog's part, but the only part is they had to show you both perspectives, so that element of you not knowing is taken away. You know exactly how each and every one of the characters' motives are.
Well, and that's why the theater the showdown at the theater was such a huge, intense climax, because it was like, well, I know Abby's been through literal hell. I know that Ellie's been through literal hell. And here we are, but I'm still playing as Abby. And so I'm just like, Jesus, I don't know what's going to happen next, you know?
Right. Right.
And I think it was interesting because, and some people disagree with me on this, and some people agree with me on this. I think Abby, like, I think of it two different ways. I think of it, one, Ellie only knows and loves and trusts a handful of people.
Right.
Whereas Abby, I think, is loved and trusted by a whole community. You know, right. And in that sense, too, much like Joel, Abby really is Joel.
Mm-hmm.
And in that final moment, when Abby decides that, you know, these last days have just been enough, and she wants to just stop. She wants to break the cycle of violence.
Mm-hmm.
I think in that moment, I think Abby's a little bit of a better person, because she's chosen to accept that her revenge quest has gotten everyone she deeply loves killed. It has forced her down a path where she ended up betraying her own community for this Seraphite, you know, and it's forced her to know that she only has one person that, you know, I assume at that point she's got strong affinity for, probably not love, but, you know, and that's Lev. And in that moment, when she's about to kill Dinah and she lets Dinah go and she lets Ellie go, she's become basically like Joel's spirit animal, so to speak.
The bigger person. Yeah.
She's seen all of the cycle of violence that leads to her dying like Joel, and probably in that moment she thinks, oh yeah, I'm gonna get done in like Joel because of this, you know. And I took from her what she took from me, and she's like, and I have to live with the fact that she killed my dad, and she has to live with the fact that, you know, I killed her dad, and we've both killed each other's friends, because at that point Abby's killed all of Ellie's closest friends, you know.
I want to expound on that, because I was hoping that there would be something. I was hoping that Naughty Dog would have pulled a Marvel and did an end credit scene at the end of the credits.
What, with her just walking away?
Well, not even just her walking away, but like I wanted for it to get to a point where Abby and Joe, because as you know, at the end of the game, you really see that from Abby, and you ultimately see it at the end of Ellie, and that's why Ellie lets Abby go, because Ellie saw something. She saw that flash of Joel, and had that feeling of what you just said, that if I keep this going, eventually we're gonna go. We're gonna take each other out. This is not gonna stop. And so she lets Abby go. And I wish there would have been a scene that where Abby and Ellie would have been talking to each other, almost like if let's say something hypothetically happens to, and this would have been a crazy lead up to episode, you know, part 3. Let's say something happens to Lev, right? And Abby feels that same pain over again, you know, but somewhere along the line, she's having a conversation. Years down the line, she's having a conversation with Ellie. And Ellie is talking to her and she says, do you see why I felt the way I felt? Do you see why
you wanted them to say it?
Yeah, you know, like you feel, and you know, almost like to the extent where you feel something that's been taken from you, you know. But they could have done that with each other's, you know, father figures, you know.
Yeah, it could have been like, you took everything from me, Ellie. And then, you know, Abby could have been like, your dad killed my father, who could have had the cure, and then Joel killed all of my friends and everybody I grew up with. And
I wanted, you know, for her to say, like, you understand that pain, and do you finally see why I traveled great distances to get that revenge, and you are starting to become the one person that you despised and killed over. And if they would have showcased that, like Ellie would have had that conversation and tell Abby that literally, you are becoming the same person that you traveled states to kill because they took something from you. And that would have had that resolution. And it also would have showed a moment where they would have, settled their differences ultimately and said, you know what, you're right. And that would at least brought some type of closure. Because at this point, Ellie lost everything. She lost the love of her life. She lost that simple life, that farm life that she had. She lost her connection to Joe because her fingers were bit off by Abby in that last fight, so she can't play the guitar anymore. She lost everything. At least would have gotten that bit of closure to it, But I'm not upset with the ending. Because I think that ending, it was almost parallel to how The Last of Us was.
It is.
They get all the way to the goal just to turn around and not fulfill the goal.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think that said it better than anything. There's sort of an expanded symmetry in Last of Us Part 2 that a lot of people who have shit on the game have missed entirely in Part 2. And I think another thing that was missed too by some of the people who played and beat the game is, I don't know about you, but I think two things. One, I think it is a huge game, and it is definitely a crazy long game. And at times, especially as Abby, it's like, Jesus Christ, is this game over yet? Like, holy shit. But by the time you get to the really end of that, like for me, I felt that exhaustion that like Ellie felt, and it was just like, Jesus Christ. Like I too, just like Ellie, like I wanted it to be over. And I wonder if that's intentional, like that length of how much you have to go through to it being like, like I'm at the end, and like that whole thing.
Now that you put it in that perspective, I can agree with you. I wonder if that was intentional, because just like how you felt that, I felt that too. I felt like I got to a point where I was like, oh my gosh, when is this over? And when it is mentally taxing. And I think that dealt with over the time where you just got to deal with so much. You got to deal with, the supreme goal of trying to knock off the Joel away. Then you got to deal with the clickers. Then you got to deal with the WLF. Then you got to go with all the way, halfway to Santa Monica. Then deal with the Rattlers. They got a different fact.
Oh, that's what it was, the Rattlers.
Rattlers, yeah, and I forgot, you had to deal with the Seraphites. So you had to deal with all of these things. I was just, by the time I got to the end, I was mentally drained. I was taxed. I was like, I got to the end, I was like, I laid on my bed, and after I texted you, I said, finally,
it's done.
I have done it. It is done. And I just laid out on the bed. I said, oh my gosh. And that could have been intentional. Now that you say that. And that probably was the reason why they didn't shift back and forth between Ellie and Abby. They wanted you to be completely tapped out, by the end. And I was. I felt every bit of that. I was like, oh my gosh.
And that brings up a good point too, because like, on the one hand, perhaps from a narrative gameplay standpoint, switching back and forth between the two would make us feel differently. But without playing for 3 days straight as Ellie, 3 days straight as Abby, maybe we wouldn't feel what was meant to be felt, which is that exhaustion of like dang, I want it to be over too,
Right.
Now, something that I heard on IGN employee Alana Pierce's YouTube channel I watched her go through the last 20 minutes of The Last of Us Part 2. And
Did you watch her spoiler cast?
I didn't watch her specific spoiler cast. I know she's friends with Troy Baker and he was on it. But I watched her abbreviated playthrough of the end of The Last of Us Part 2. And something that she said almost immediately, which I agree with and honestly didn't even think about personally when I played it myself, was after Ellie let Abby go and she's going away on that damn boat, which by the way is the menu, which I thought was great poetry, that it's like, what the fuck is this boat? Because it could have easily been a dock in Seattle on a fucking rainy day. Like, it's like, okay, what is this boat? Is this how I'm gonna escape fucking Seattle? And
they literally put the ending, the conclusion, right in front of you. In front of them.
What fucking savagery. But no, something Alana Pierce said, which I agree with in retrospect, is killing or not killing Abby should have been a choice. Because she felt at the end that she got robbed of her true revenge. Because much like you, in not, who gives a fuck about Abby and her WLF and her people and stuff, like, this is Ellie. Ellie's my girl, rightly or wrongly. That's what I want, And I think it's interesting. Well, but then again, it's interesting that it wasn't a choice, but at the same time, though, if it was a choice, then it wouldn't have symmetry with the end of The Last of Us 1, which is going to great lengths to this goal and then ultimately changing your mind.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm not a game designer.
I get it. Yeah, it just depends. It depends on the way Druckmann wanted to tell that story.
Mm-hmm.
I think that because that was one of the I wouldn't say criticism, but that was one of the major points. Because I watched it and listened to a lot of different spoiler casts, and that was one of the biggest things they pointed out. Yeah, that was one of the biggest things they pointed out was agency. They wanted more agency. Mm-hmm. They wanted, even like the first part, the first scene where you kill Lena. And it has that press square, and you just keep swinging her with the club to get the information out.
Yeah, which, by the way, I was a big fan of that scene. I loved how you see the first part of violence, but then the camera swings around and starts zooming in on Ellie as you keep hitting square. I was like, ooh, I love that.
Yeah, and they kind of, you don't notice that.
Before I forget, something that my girlfriend Jessica actually pointed out, because she actually worked in a coroner's office in LA County. Before she moved up here, and she said, and I'm just gonna have to go with her on this because I don't know anybody who would know this unless they're a psychopathic killer. She said she thought that the blood spray when you kill people or shot people or anything like that was the most realistic blood splatter she's ever seen in a video game.
Oh man, have you tried to get away from like the dogs? And because I use one of the canisters, like I used to use and that's one too. It used one of the canisters and it just blows up. Oh my gosh. And it's just like chunks of blood everywhere. And it's just like, whoa, dude, like that it was a little too real.
I think we'll get into that when we get down to because I mean we've done this whole talk so far, we haven't even talked about gameplay, which is hilarious. But just talking on the blood there, back to the scene in the hospital, and the way it splattered across her face, apparently it's super realistic.
Right.
So
right. Like I said, they do a little trickery because you don't know that it's a part that you have to continue to do, because in the previews they just show that one scene and they show the final scene and Ellie's just swinging with the lead pipe. So you don't know that you have to keep pressing square over and over. And an interesting thing that I heard watching the Game Informer spoiler cast of it is I forgot who said it. I think maybe Andy or one of the editors on there, and he said that was the first moment where you could see Ellie walking down this path to becoming a monster, because it's almost like you're putting her in the shoes, or you're making her walk down this path, because there's no sense of agency. You don't get to choose whether Lena lives or dies. You just keep pressing square over and over and over again until she's gone, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be one of those things that's just going to be one of those things that's eternally debated, because if you look at the lack of agency in the story versus how much more agency there is in actually playing the game, it's almost, I say that very like walking right up to the edge and looking down the canyon, it's almost like the game was almost at odds with, well, how much agency do you give a player during a combat scenario versus how little agency there is in the story.
Right.
And it's interesting because I felt, particularly in the first game, and then full disclosure, I replayed half of the first game, the remastered, before I played Last of Us Part 2. I didn't get to finish it like you did. But from what I remember as a whole on The Last of Us Part 1 and the times that I played it, is there was a super lack of agency in the combat fights. Like, you could sneak your way around mostly, but there were just some fights where you just had to fight and you didn't have a choice in the matter. And I think it's interesting because in the actual gameplay, I felt like, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I felt like I could sneak through every encounter, whether stealth kills or just avoiding people.
Yeah.
I felt like I could do that in this game, which is interesting.
Some parts that in that game, that was actually probably the best thing to do, because there were parts in that game where I just had to run. Like, it was either too many ads or too many clickers, and I just couldn't fight them. I had to run, and that sometimes is the best choice. And I like that. That gives more dynamic. Which plays? I guess we're going into the gameplay and
I guess so.
Mechanics of it. I think
how am I doing on wrecking your notes? You're perfectly organized notes.
My notes look like a scribble pad right now because I'm constantly writing stuff as we go along. Looks like I'm trying to build a time machine, so much notes and shit around here. But I think it's much more dynamic than the first one, especially literally playing 15 hours, 4 days worth of part 1 going into part 2. It was blatant and it was clear that, okay, there's a lot more stuff that I can do. There's a lot more quality of life things that I like.
Yeah.
As well.
Okay, I have one major complaint about the quality of life. So, I think overall, and I'll get into the nitty gritty. Overall, gameplay way better than the first one, 100%. 100%. However, my one complaint, and I don't understand this design choice. In the first one, I could always swap between having a bottle or a brick. In this one, you're stuck with whatever you picked up. You couldn't drop it. If you threw it, you'd make too much noise. You could not drop it in part 2.
You couldn't drop it in part 2. However, I think in part 1, because I'm trying to recall, I literally just played that a week ago. I don't think you could switch between the bottle and a brick.
Yes, you could. If you just looked at it, Joel would replace the bottle with whatever the item you had was. So if you had a brick in your hand and you picked up a bottle, he'd put the brick down.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah. I'm thinking be able to hold a brick and a bottle at the same time.
No. Yeah. I'm talking about just being able to swap, because I don't know about you.
Yeah.
But for The Last of Us, I'm a brick man. Bricks all day, every day.
Bottles took too much noise. They made too much noise. So I would try to find a brick. I couldn't find a bottle. I think I will say this about the gameplay, at least the mechanics of it. This is the best Naughty Dog game as far as mechanics I have ever played.
Yeah, for sure. And so this is going to sound terrible, but I think most people, even if they're huge fans of Naughty Dog, know what I'm talking about. This is the only Naughty Dog game where I felt that the shooting finally was on par with I don't know, pick a third person shooter, a Gears of War or a fucking Splinter Cell or something like that, where the shooting finally felt as tight as it fucking should be.
I think, to be honest, as far as third person shooters, I think Ubisoft, like the Division, I think they nailed it. That's the best feeling I've had as far as like third person shooters. I think Ubisoft is pretty good with that, even with like Ghost Wildlands, um, Division, you like it's a Splinter Cell. It just feels good. It feels good at that moment. But
Well,
yeah,
the thing for me that's always bugged me about all the Uncharted games, including 4, and especially the first Last of Us, is the shooting felt loose and imprecise.
Oh my gosh.
And finally, it feels like they've finally, I don't know, either they figured it out finally or they hired a new dude or something. You know,
they did something, because going back, because even if you played like even the reports of that great master collection, that remaster collection, woo! I mean, it looks polished and it looks clean, but they did not touch the mechanics on that. And that thing is rough. Playing Uncharted 1, it's rough. It's rough.
So, and then something that I really, really loved, I loved the prone mechanic.
Me too.
Like, the prone mechanic was awesome. It was perfect. It worked correctly. You know, I felt like, you know, I would have to move my body correctly so my feet weren't sticking out. You know, like I felt really good about that.
And the AI was smart too, because there were times where I thought I was good hiding under the car, and the AI found me today. You want to pull me out by the legs? Yeah. And now, you know, I got to fight my way out. And
yep, exactly.
I think, but I did. I love that prone feature, because it like, especially like that clip that I sent you with Abby, and when I got that crossbow. Oh my gosh, that was the worst thing they could have gave me, was that thing, man. That was just, oh my god, and it felt so good shooting that cross. Like, I didn't want to shoot anything else. I didn't want to shoot anything else, you know. And I would find myself switching. Like, if I was out in wider territories, then I would use the crossbow, and then I would use the silencer. I would try to find materials to use the silencer and put on the pistol, because I want to be quiet. Or if I was close, you know, in closed situations, then I would switch to the shotgun, because obviously at one point in time it's going to get hectic, especially if you're in a tight area. If you shoot or try to stab a clicker or whatever, somebody's going to notice, and you're going to have to come in loud anyway. And plus the sawn off and the shotgun was just, it was good for close quarters where I wanted to be at, you know. And so, but I think the mechanics way more dynamic in The Last of Us 2 than Part 1.
Yeah, I also didn't feel like I got fucked by the AI like I did in the first game.
Yeah.
One thing that definitely wasn't fixed from The Last of Us 1 to Last of Us 2 is when you have an AI companion and they're fucking in your way.
Yeah. That happened to me a couple of times, and I'm like, oh my gosh, move.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that happened to me a couple of times. I'm trying to think what else. How did you feel about the crafting and that animation that they added to, you know, when you go to the workbench and you see Ellie breaking the gun apart, cleaning it up?
I personally loved the crafting. I thought the crafting was way better. I liked the way the menu system worked in real time when you're in the field as well. I thought that worked better than the first one. And it was interesting because it was so funny. And I'm sure you probably felt the same going from the remastered to Part 2. You know, they kept the control scheme largely the same.
They did.
Because that was one thing that honestly kind of bugged me was holding R1 to run. Like, it seemed kind of funny to me that like you'd have that, because like I feel like most games, you know, you click your left stick to run. You know. But it was kind of good from the sense that it's like, okay, well, it's been like 7-8 years since the last game. You know, they kept a familiar control scheme to keep it consistent between games. I can respect that, you know, and that the evolution of the crafting menu was improved greatly, and I like being able to swap stuff in and out with the different slots and stuff like that, and rearrange them on the D-pad. That was nice.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I did love the fact that if you're aiming and you press R1, it switches to different weapons. Like that little addition right there.
Yeah, that was super helpful.
Yeah, I really love that.
The one thing that kind of messed me up, and I realize it's the same in Part 1, was the whole aiming but not raising your gun and then hitting R2 as your reload.
Mm-hmm.
Like that
Mm-hmm.
still kind of messed me up a little bit, you know?
Yeah, we used to just hitting square.
Yeah, right. And I'd be doing that, and I'd be doing that like with a silenced thing, and so I'd fucking smack an enemy and be like, no, 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 I didn't want to alert him, you know?
Right. Right. You know, it's just like I've done that before too, a few times where I was trying to reload and then I accidentally threw a brick and it bust through a window and they heard me and I was like, oh, you know, and so, but yeah, other than that, it just took some time to get used to. But I think playing part 1 did help a lot because I was already in that mind state. I was already in, you know, it felt familiar to me. So
yeah,
yeah, I definitely appreciated that. Like I said, I love the animation where even like the animations, like I don't know if you turned the camera around, but you know, if you're sneaking up on a character and just to see their facial animation.
Oh, I always spun the camera around once I grabbed them.
Oh God. I mean,
and then the other thing, which actually annoyed me when I came to playing as Abby, was Ellie having her trademark switchblade and being able to just fucking murk people, but then you couldn't do it as Abby.
Right, you had to make shifts.
Yeah, and I was like, and like when they gave her shit, like that was probably the one truly on the nose, like okay, Abby's Joel thing, where it's like, you know, her play patterns were the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah, but yeah, no, I personally really enjoyed every single combat encounter, which I can't say I enjoyed every combat encounter in the first game. Because like in every combat encounter in part 2, I felt like I always had a way out. I could always, you know, because they tell you in the first game, like, oh, you can just run and hide. And it's like, no, you can't. Not always.
Yeah.
You know, whereas part 2, you always could. You know, you could always run and hide. You could always return to, I mean, not perfect stealth, but like that elevated stealth that you get, you know? So like I really appreciated that, and I really appreciated and you know, something that I don't know if you've figured out, but I didn't know until about halfway through the game that as opposed to throwing a brick through a window, you could just go up to it and hit R2 with your rifle
and bust the windows out.
Yeah, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, I was on that car too. You do it to the car.
Oh man, I never even thought about that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's some stuff with collectibles in there. Like you bust a car out and then it might be like a little trading card.
Yeah. I mean, I probably missed everything on Ellie's side of the campaign until I got to Abby. Because, so, like you were saying earlier, so you were saying once you got to Seattle, you played ruthlessly. You didn't play for stealth as Ellie?
No, I played stealth on both sides because that's usually my nature in a game like that.
Sure.
I like to move quietly. What I was saying was at that moment in time when I saw Ellie watch Joel die, I was so upset that I wanted to come in loud. I wanted them to know.
Mm-hmm.
Owen and Lena and Mel and Abby. I wanted them to know I was there. So that's how much I hated them at that moment. I wanted it to be loud, you know. But I'm naturally a stealth person, which usually takes me a while to get through games like that. So I move quiet. I take my time. I try to be careful, you know. And I always felt the satisfaction. I love the satisfaction feeling that you feel like, yeah, I got through this whole thing without anybody suspecting me. I feel like a secret agent, you know, like
yeah, exactly.
You know, so especially like I felt like even with Abby, I felt like it was even more easier to do with Abby just because of her fit and her athleticism and the way she plays. Obviously, she doesn't have the knife, so it's more easier for you to sneak up with Ellie because she has her mother's blade, opposed to Abby, which they probably would like you to be more guns blazing or something like that.
So it's funny you say that because I played Ellie as stealthily as I could, and when I got to Abby, because I was definitely a bit mad when they said day one, when they rolled out. I was like, oh shit, we're gonna do this all over again. You know, it's that fucking meme. Oh shit, here we go again.
Day 4. You saying
Yeah,
three is me.
exactly. But no, I played Abby super aggressively the entire time, which is interesting because I played Ellie super stealthily. So like I played incredibly stealthy and then incredibly aggro when it came to Abby, and it was interesting because I feel like almost Abby, particularly the guns she gets, is a little bit more designed to be more aggressive. You know, but it was it was a little bit refreshing because I actively chose not to do stealth as Abby because I didn't care too much whether she lived or died, and and then B, also because I was like, well, she is built like a brick shit house, like she would fucking, like they give you a fucking assault rifle like right off the bat with her,
Yep.
So I just went for it, 9 out of 10 encounters with her, I was fucking hella aggressive.
I will say with Ellie, what I loved at the end, they gave you the silence auto rifle, and I was like, oh my gosh, why did they
it was
give
a MP. It was a
really?
It was a submachine gun. It was the MP5.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that shit.
Yeah,
that shit was sick.
Oh gosh, yeah, So, but yeah, I went stealth on both parts. Now, I will say this though, I think Abby's perspective had the more intense combat encounters.
For sure, because you'd have combat encounters, particularly at the end, where there was WLF warring with the Seraphites.
But even with the clickers too, as well. Like when she first, gets rescued and meets Lev and his sister, and they're running those clickers.
For sure. But think about it this way: if you're playing as Ellie, Ellie's not scared, right? Ellie's been taking these things down since she was a little child, and she's immune. She ain't scared of them at all. It's more like, oh shit, it's an inconvenience. Whereas Abby, it's like, I am fucking terrified of these things. I have to have my mask on, and I think they did really well. It's kind of like that unwritten story thing of like, yeah, Abby and Lev would be terrified of, I think, would Lev call them the demons?
The demons, right.
And like, yeah, Abby would be terrified of that because even though she's fucking tough as shit, she's not tough as shit when it comes to the infected,
Well, they even insinuated that at the beginning when you first played as Abby. She's not used to that. She's not used to seeing them. And so, like, at that first part, once you get through, well, I wouldn't say the first part, but at the part where there's too many of them to fight, you got to run until you meet Joel and Tommy.
Yeah, I actually really loved that. I call it The Last of Us is 28 Days Later moment, where because you had like the swarming enemies, and there was just too many. It was like, oh yeah, I don't got enough bullets for this.
Right, all you got to do is run, man. Like you can't fight them.
Exactly.
And but she definitely had the most intense encounter, especially like I said, that scene where I knew something was gonna happen. Like when Lev and his sister got through the door and said they're gonna try to find another way for you to get out, I was like, oh shit, it's on the clicker. I had to sit through this and try to man down the door.
Oh yeah, and there was too many of them. I hated those ones that were like in the walls.
In the hotel. Oh,
dude,
my God.
Fuck that.
I got to the point where I got used to seeing them because they started off in the hotel and then they popped off in the hospital too. But like there were parts where you could just tell that, okay, I see a body here. Let me just hit a flamethrower here and let them burn up as he try to scream out. So, but when you don't notice them, oh my gosh, man, it's like it is terrifying.
Well, since you mentioned the hospital, we should probably talk about Abby's Resident Evil moment in the hospital. So, how did you feel about the story placement of that? How did you feel about that whole encounter / boss fight? Like, what were your thoughts?
It gave me there were two moments in that game where I really got Uncharted feels. The first one was when, Jesse rescued Ellie, and they're shooting the zombies off, the clickers off in the cars, trying to get away, in that truck scene. But the second one was when you encounter the Rat King boss, and you're just trying to keep hope alive and use every bit of equipment you have to your disposal to try to take this thing down, because he's coming at you full force, and it's like you just putting rounds and rounds of bullets in him, and he's not stopping. You're hitting him with explosives and Molotovs, and he's not stopping. So slowing down, and it's like, oh my gosh, and you just got to keep running and running and trying to find materials to keep crafting stuff to hold him off enough until you get to that cutscene where you're just running and getting away, and it was an intense scene. It was exciting. Like I said, I got real big Uncharted feels from that moment. It gives you a little bit of the horror elements because it's dark. You don't know what's coming around the corner. I find myself hitting the, I don't know what you want to call it, I guess the sensitive hearing mode, where I'm like, okay, I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. That's such a funny thing, because like I never know what to call it either. I think they call it something officially, but like the listen mode or the the sound radar, whatever the fuck, I don't know.
Yeah, stuff like that. So I found myself hitting that like every 5 seconds, because lights are off. The lights are off. All I got is a flashlight, and I got a half a round of bullets, and I'm trying to, preserve this shit, man. On top of something, I know something is in here. But I cut this power on. There's a blood trail gone through the void beyond, and I'm like, oh shit, man, let me get this first aid kit and get the fuck out of here, man. And so it's an intense moment, man. But I loved it. And then, like I said, I'm playing with headphones, so I'm hearing every little thing going on.
Yeah, that's gotta suck, dude.
Oh my gosh, and I'm like, dude, I gotta get the fuck out of here, man, because it's getting heavy. It's getting heavy. But I enjoyed it, though. I enjoyed it thoroughly. But there's no breathing moment at that point, because you got.
Oh no, it's all tension. As soon as Abby talks to the chick that you violently murders, Ellie, she's like, "Oh, the supplies you need are downstairs in the hazmat or the quarantine rooms or whatever they call it."
Right.
And then they're like, "Oh, we haven't cleared those floors yet because we..." And that's the other thing. And I personally really love this story moment. And it blows my mind they didn't go into more detail, other than the little bits of things that we got when we were actually down there. And they're like, "Oh, we haven't been down there because that was ground zero for the infection." Right. And like, I actually set the controller down, and I was like, "Hold the fuck up! You're telling me my city is ground zero for the fucking apocalypse?"
It started there, man.
And so I actually had a little bit of a freak out, because I was like, because if you've been following things on quarantine, you know that at least one of the epicenters of the actual quarantine that's going on right now in 2020 was just a hop, skip, and a stone's throw away from Seattle in Redmond, in an old folks home where there's like 60 old folks who died of COVID.
Right.
And so I was just like, so when I heard that, knowing how the real world is right now, and shit's still pretty fucked up around here as well,
right.
I just like had to set the controller down. I was like, man, if Naughty Dog only knew when they were making this game, because that decision had to have happened years ago, years ago. Like, it wouldn't surprise me, as shitty as it is if there's like some sort of cancel wave about like, oh, we can't have post-apocalyptic in Seattle because Last of Us and Ground Zero and there's an epicenter. Right. Cancel it.
Well, that was kind of the speculation. That's why they thought Naughty Dog pushed back the game first time. Because we were like, yeah, maybe the wrong place, wrong time. We got this, this virus going on. Our game is about outbreak.
Well, and I think I said it before we, obviously did our Last of Us cast last time we recorded. I thought it would be interesting going through a game where there's an occupying military force, when right now there's an occupying force in Seattle.
Outside.
Yeah, like the fuck. So
where I'm at right now, I can walk down 5 blocks because I'm like maybe 5 or 6 blocks from the White House, and the armed forces are out there. It's like blocked off. Like protesters are still out there, and the armed forces are out there. It's real. It's real. Only thing we haven't got to yet is checkpoints, like those active checkpoints going from ward to ward. Like we haven't gotten there yet. But
Yeah, I have not. I have not been in downtown Seattle. I've got some friends who are in there. They're like, yeah, it's real bad.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. It's. I mean, it's not as bad here, but
Mhm.
it's the armed forces is out there. Like there's a certain part of 16th Street where you just can't drive you can't drive to all the way to the White House line. Whereas like that's like 16th and H,
Mhm.
and because it's blocked off, the armed forces out there, it's just no way of getting there unless you are walking. You cannot drive there. And yeah, man. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, there's to go back to what we were talking about. There is no room for breathing. Once you get to that point, once you talk to Lena and you go in that hospital, you get that stuff because right after that, you got to go to the hotel, and that is even more intense. That is like
I thought you did
hell.
the. I thought you did the hotel before that.
Is it before that?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
thought
yeah,
it was.
yeah. Because you climb up the tower, and then you're fighting the Seraphites up in
That's
the
right.
sky tower, and then you're crossing that thing for like the third time, but then Abby falls,
Right.
and then she
Right.
falls in that pool,
Right.
and then you come down the hotel, and then you're like right there next to the hospital.
That's where it's like no room for breathing because I'm like, yo, I'm on the 42nd floor and I got to get to what floor? Oh my gosh, you got me shit. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's a tight, confined space. Clickers running around. You don't know where one can run through. Plus, you got to deal with the ones popping out of the walls. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, dude, like it is draining.
Well, and then for me, when I got to the ground zero quarantine area, and I'm reading about all these dudes, and they're talking about the infection and the way it's hitting people and stuff, and they've made some mention, I believe, towards the beginning of Last of Us Part 2 about how like the longer things are infected, the more dangerous they are,
Mm-hmm.
and you fight supposedly, I assume, like the very first infected plus all the others who were probably infected with him or her, and
Right,
they've like congealed into just this hulking mass of body parts.
right,
And it's just
right.
like, and it's funny because like I played Resident Evil 2 this year and Resident Evil 3, and both of those got big hulking zombie things.
Right.
And then I was like, all right, here's fucking Last of Us's nemesis. Let's go.
Right.
And shit's up when they start giving you flamethrower ammo. And you're like, all right, I
Yeah.
know what's
Right.
happening
Okay.
now.
Right. Okay. Apparently, you're giving me this for a reason. But
Yeah,
all right.
exactly.
Um. But Yeah. Yeah,
I
man.
think the thing I like the best out of that for being, and it was definitely a little set piecey and a little movie, action movie y compared to the rest of The Last of Us.
So Michael Bayish. Michael Bayish. You
I mean,
know.
there wasn't that many explosions. I don't think.
No, I mean, for that one scene, it's like a little bit. It's not Uncharted. Uncharted is definitely a
Yeah,
Michael Bay
no,
movie.
Uncharted is
That's
hella
really,
Michael Bay in a
but
good in a good way, in a good way.
but
But I think the thing that I liked about that fight was that as you killed them or the pieces would fall off and they would
right,
become like ads to
right,
fight.
right,
Now, and
right.
correct me if I'm wrong, because I only played it once, but didn't in the end, when you quote unquote kill it, one piece fell off and scurried outside? And like
I've
actually
only
like ran away to fight another day kind of thing?
I've only played it once too, so I can't fully remember. I'll have to replay that encounter. Luckily, they got an encounter option where you can just replay that
Yep.
one scene over again. But yeah, I'll have to replay that encounter because I'm not completely sure. I do know that not from that boss, but there are parts of the game where you may think you've killed an infected and they're crawling to you
Mm-hmm.
and they can still grab your leg. Like when you don't notice, and they can still grab your leg and you gotta fight them off. I've seen that happen where
Yeah.
I watch them crawl and then I just shoot them as they go. But they might have. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I have to go back as far as that boss scene.
Yeah,
Um,
it's hard to say. I think that's what happened, but I'm not sure. Kind of in the same way that at the very end of the game, in the Santa Barbara moment, like when you fight through that crazy compound and you unleash the clickers on the chains, which I loved, by the way. I unleashed every single one of those clickers on those motherfuckers.
Oh, so you can't. I tried to be quiet and shoot like the chains, or it pop off, but I couldn't shoot the chain.
No.
So,
You got to sneak up to the thing, and then you like press triangle or something, and you take like it's just like a little bar lock.
Oh, okay.
And then you release them, and then they just go to town on them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I know there's a way to unleash them, but I just went ahead and killed them because I was like, yo, I don't want them to kill me too. So I just went ahead and did away with them all, man. But I did. Now this was interesting because this doesn't happen, or at least I didn't see it happening in The Last of Us Part 1, because usually in Part 1, and I may be wrong, but I think in Part 1, you never fight two factions at the same time. Not that I can recall. It's either you're going against a moment where you got to fight clickers, or you're going against a moment where you got to fight looters and rioters. But they're never together.
Yeah. Somebody don't quote me on that, but as I recall, I think that's the case. And usually, historically, in video games, that's always been the case because of RAM. You know? Like, because you know, it's a huge jump between the PS3 and the PS4. Like, I mean, the PS3's got 512 megabytes versus the PS4's got 8 gigs. You know, and that's actually the reason why in Destiny you never saw all three factions fighting at once. It was always only two because of memory constraints.
Okay,
and it wasn't until Destiny 2, which was, you know, built on the next gen consoles at the time. They were still next gen. You know, when you would see like the mix of all of the enemies and sometimes the Taken and all that sort of stuff
fighting each other. Okay.
Yeah, that's just a technical thing. So I don't think, unless we're wrong, I'm happy to be wrong, I don't think you fought both factions or multiple factions simultaneously the way you do in Last of Us Part 2.
So that's the part that interests me, because I was going through, this was early in Ellie's day one, I want to say. Maybe because it was a moment where I was
in the subway.
Not the subway. It might have been even before the subway. It was out in the open, and there were WLF in this. It was this building. I had to get through this building to get to the. Oh, it might have been the television station. It might have been
yeah.
So I had to get through this building, and so I'm as how I play. I'm going stealthy through the grass. And I get in the building, and sometimes what I would do is, if it's two people walking together, I would grab one, shoot the other person, and then knock out the one that I'm holding. Just to, you know, to be quiet, almost like some Splinter Cell stuff, but I would use a sniper. But in this case, I thought I had my silencer on, but it wasn't. So when I shot him, he dodged it and he missed. So Dina ends up shooting and killing him, and I just end up knocking out the guard. So when that happened, I guess it alerted the clickers, and I get upstairs to the second level. All of a sudden, clickers just come out of nowhere, and they start wiping out the WLC. And I'm like, oh shit, I've never seen nothing like this. I accidentally alerted them, and they just went to town on the WLC. So at this point, I'm like, oh shit, Dina, we gotta get the fuck out of here, because they're about to come in here. Like, they're about to come in here, and lo and behold, they got in the building, and so I hid in the spot, and the clickers was just going through the building that I was in, tearing the.
See, that's actually my favorite gameplay part of the whole Part 2 was the subway and any scenes where I could lure clickers to my enemies and use the infected to take them out. That was my favorite part. So anytime the game let me did that, I totally did that. Like, honestly, probably my standout favorite scene actually in the whole game was the subway scene. I want to say it's in day 1. Maybe it's in day 2 after you're running from the TV station. Maybe it's probably day 2. It's the end of day 2. The first time you fight the the acid bloaters. But you're down there in that subway, and they've just got the flare light, and there's like a fuck ton of WLF. But then you also see there's a fuck ton of clickers, and I was just like, oh shit, I am fucking surrounded. And I threw a brick towards the WLF, and I just watched the clickers go to town. I was like, oh shit. It was so satisfying. I loved seeing that. That was so cool. And then I just like stealthed my way through. Like, it was so good.
Yeah, and like that's one of those moments. Like I said, that is much more dynamic of a mechanic than The Last of Us was.
Mm-hmm.
They give you that leeway to say, okay, this is the encounter. However you want to do it, go for it and do it. And there's a specific one though when you with Ellie, and it is you got to go through the houses in the suburbs, and man,
with the WLF and that's the other thing we didn't talk about is the dogs. So this is the one point in the game where I actually was mad that they made me do it. I get that it's a video game. I get that it's fake. But man, I had German Shepherds. They're not with me anymore. You're making me kill German Shepherds. Shame on you, Naughty Dog. Shame. I mean, I'm not that broken up about it. I know it's a video game. I know it's fake, and I know if I don't kill them, they're certainly gonna kill me. Them dogs are vicious. Fucking rip your arm off, tear your neck out. Jesus Christ. And I think you're right in that moment in the suburbs, which, by the way, one, that's definitely what Seattle suburbs look like. Two, there's like a hill usually always in the distance. There ain't no hill around there. Like that suburb's on the hill. Just saying. More, I know it's Seattle. But man, that was the first time I noticed like that the game had a very realism, like ultra realism, hyper violentness to it. Was when I was laying those like canned trip mines around, and they were blowing the parts off the dog and the parts off the body. And I don't know about you, but something I experienced in a couple of different combat encounters, it didn't happen too often, also because it's pretty hectic. But like I went to go shoot one of the WLF dudes, and I would like miss and shoot them in the elbow, and their fucking arm would pop off, and it's like the arm that's holding the gun, and they're just like screaming there as they're holding their arm, and they're calling out their names like, oh my god, Jimmy, your arm, fuck dude, and like then I'd be fighting these other dudes, and I'd go back to fighting the dude whose arm I accidentally shot off, and he would have bled out already, and I think that was really cool because I haven't seen you shoot an enemy and they bleed out eventually in a lot of video games. Because I mean, in real life, you get shot. I mean, you're gonna like your clock starts ticking. like that. Like that's just how it works. So I think that was, I don't know. Did you encounter anything like that like caught you off guard with its simultaneously a gameplay mechanic, but it's also realism?
Probably would have to be. Like I said, it was the dogs because the AI was just the dog AI was just really, really smart. It was especially like if they picked up your scent.
Yeah, they were relentless.
they figured out and sometimes even like throwing a brick to try to get them off the trail made it even. It was almost like, man, I try to get them off my trail, but they're still here. So another one, would come down and. All it took was a quick whiff, and they got it. They were on you, and that was it, And so, but I think that actually more of the realism would come from the Seraphites, because once they got the whistle, and I found that out very early in the game, it's like, okay, I got to take one out before they whistle. Because once they start whistling, then another ad will come, and another ad will come, and they'll start to get, they'll pile up, and they'll start to look for you and hunt for you. That was my probably my more realism moment right there was the fact that, okay, this AI is very, very, very smart.
Yeah.
And I got to find ways to get around this AI, because if I get, I was that person that if I got caught, I'm just hitting the restart encounter button, because I just didn't want to waste bullets. I'm like, oh shoot, I'm caught. I don't want to shoot my way out. Restart encounter, and I'll go again. So in order for me, especially like I said, the part where you very first encounter the fights, and they're walking like 3 or 4 in a group, and they're walking together. And that one moment where I just prone in the grass and they're walking right past me,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like this Call of Duty moment or this like militant moment, and like you're in the mud, and I'm like, oh shit, they spot me here. So that was my more realistic encounter. But that encounter where you got to go through the suburbs and get through those houses, dude, I must have played that encounter over like 8 times, dude, because it's just so
many. It's so dense with people.
It's so dense, and you can't run loud because they hear you.
Mm-hmm.
Even to a point where I just try to speed run a certain, because what I did at that moment was I tried to find a route,
Mm-hmm.
master that route, and then go through. So even when I tried to speed through, like run through a certain house, go down the steps, grab a certain thing, go out the back door, wait for this person. If you run too fast, they're gonna hear that. They're gonna hear the footsteps. Even if you kind of like open the door kind of loudly or like bust the window, they hear all of that stuff. So now it's like, oh my God, and that was a moment. That was a moment for me. But
yeah, for sure.
the dogs, I love dogs. I have an affinity for dogs.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
But I had to do what I had to do, man. I'm like, man, it's either me or these dogs, man. If these dogs catch me, I'm sorry, Poochie, but I gotta put this explosive canister right here. I gotta throw a Molotov at you, man, because dude, like if you catch me here, because it's not like it's just one guy walking with a dog.
Yeah,
separated pack. They're like 6 feet away from each other. So
exactly.
if one catches you, they're all gonna catch you. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly.
But I would like to see a gameplay if somebody can sneak around them or without even after hurting.
Oh man, that'd be amazing. I mean, I feel like it'd be really hard in the dog section. You could probably do it though.
You really got to master.
Like, you probably could do it.
Because like even with that, like the AI in this game, I don't think all of their routes are. I don't think there's no pattern. I think they're just procedurally generated. I think there's a little bit.
I think there's layered patterns. Personally, there's patterns on what they're on. I think there's a secondary pattern that they default to after they've noticed somebody's been killed, and then there's like a third pattern that they go to on like high alert. I think that's what it is personally. But I mean, I could be wrong. It could be procedural. Anything's possible these days.
I went through one part in that suburb area, and I was like, yo, I just ran this part 5 times, and I ran the same route 5 times, and you weren't there. You were not there those other 5 times. How are you here now this 6th time? And I was like, are you kidding me, yo? And so, yeah, it was like I just felt like, and it could have been anything that happened. Sometimes I might have overrushed. They could have been having a conversation, and the person just happened to be standing there at that moment where I'm not used to them standing there, because usually the conversation might be over and they walk off. But like, it could be anything. It could be anything, And I did feel as if like they put some type of realism toward it when you are Ellie and you're fighting to get to the hospital from her perspective, and you shoot somebody or you blow up somebody, and somebody's like, "Oh my God, Joe!" It puts a label, and it kind of puts some sincerity to the AI. They just don't make them a random AI character. It's almost like, oh crap, this person was somebody's friend I just killed. Shit, or you kill the dogs and they say, oh my gosh, and they call a dog's name, like, damn, that was somebody's like best friend.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, the whole thing, the whole layering there of them making links within the people you're murdering
Yeah.
is very impressive that they went to that length, you know. And I think it's interesting, the compare and contrast, because I think for sure, I think right now there's 3 games that are going to be talked about as game of the year at this point in time. You know, we've got Doom Eternal, got Final Fantasy VII Remake, and we've got The Last of Us Part 2. And I think one thing that'll be talked about probably at the Game of the Year Awards or Game of the Year talk is going to be the difference between the hyper, ridiculously stylized and over-the-top blood and gore of Doom Eternal, which I played, which has procedural demon destruction, which is actually really crazy to see and really cool, versus the insane realism of how the violence works in The Last of Us Part 2. Because something that caught me off guard in Last of Us Part 2 is I had no idea that there would be you know, it's something you see or you read about or you see in real life, where if somebody gets shot in a bullet, you know, the exit wound is huge or bulbous or blows out their head and stuff, and you see that in The Last of Us. I can't think of another game where you see that in a realistic style. You know, and I remember the first time I shot somebody in the face and it had realistic blowback on their back of their head, and I was like, oh wow, that's crazy, you know.
A level of detail.
And I'm not like an overly squeamish person. Maybe I'm desensitized because of video games or something. I don't know. But, you know, I think it's interesting because, you know, we know from some of the behind the scenes that some of the stuff that the creators had to make on this game, you know, made them queasy to their stomach, you know. And I get on Doom, it's a little bit different because, I mean, it is, you know, it's an R-rated Saturday morning cartoon, as the game director will tell you in a day of the week, because it is. Because, I mean, you kill him and it pops out fucking rainbow colored ammo box. You know, but whereas in The Last of Us, it's like, well, maybe they'll drop some ammo for your gun, you know, and you're really just scavenging that from their gun, you know, after you've blown their fucking leg off or something, or you've shot them in the gut and they bled out, you know. Like it's very interesting what the talk is going to be about. And I think for me, for the type of game that The Last of Us Part 2 is, having realistic violence, even though that's the quote-unquote meat of the gameplay, the fun, as it were, it's both in service to the gameplay mechanically, but it's also a narrative thing to let you know, like, hey, like, this is what really happens in gunfights. You know, and I think it's interesting that Naughty Dog went to that length, you know, and, you know, I realize there's a generational leap, but it's interesting that they were able to accomplish that, or that there's, you know, that, I don't know, the Mothers Against Guns Council or something hasn't got a hold of this game or something, you know, something like that. And it's interesting that they had the balls to do that, you know, so... I don't know. It's
such a small detail to add to a game with such heavy weight show at the same time, you know, because most games, like you said, if you do that, you show that. And I'm surprised. I would even think maybe a Far Cry would go to the extent of that, because that's literally all you're doing in Far Cry. You are sneaking up on people, you're killing people left and right, especially like Far Cry 3. To the point where you just gone mad and become this like madhouse killer. But you would think you see something like that in that type of setting.
Sure.
But even like Doom, like if you know, illustrated earlier before, Doom's a little different because Doom, you're also dealing with demons. Dealing with something that isn't real, something that isn't tangible, you know. So,
it's not real.
Yeah, you know, you see a hole blown out in the middle of a demon, you won't think twice. You know, but a hole blown out in the middle of a human being, a real human being.
Poor doggy.
Or a dog, yeah. You know, and it's like, damn. this hits home. This kind of, because it's tangible. It's something that can affect you in one way, shape, or form.
Well, and I want to say something on that too. From a lot of the reviews, I think it was Polygon and Kotaku's review of The Last of Us talking about how it was so difficult for them to get through because it was so violent, and there's so much murder. And I have two things to say about that. Like, one, you have to be a smarter fucking human than that to know that going into The Last of Us Part 2, you're going to fucking murder people. Like, it's literally the entire game of what you do in the first game, and it's just not as realistic because the generation is different, like, because I'm sure if they had that tech then, they would have done that for the first one as well,
Right.
And then my other sentiment on that is, people shitting on the game because it's too violent, and I think it's silly, really, because it's the same thing as like, well, if you want to play the game, that's what it is. And realistically, that's what the first one was too. It just wasn't in this detail, And it's the same thing as like, well, if you're squeamish about people getting shot or blood or murder or any of that stuff, why would you go see the R-rated movie? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you knew. So you knocking the content for it being that way is silly, in my opinion. Exactly. It's completely silly to me. It's like if you didn't want to, I'll take an old example. Halo 1, right? Did you ever play Halo 1?
Yeah, I just went through I went through the MCC collection.
Oh, nice.
When I was testing out the streaming.
Nice,
on the Xbox streaming.
Well, as you remember, in Halo 1 specifically, if you kill an elite and you keep punching the elite, they keep spraying blood. Like,
same in Halo 2.
They spray blood until the game engine slows down. It's ridiculous. And I remember at the time that seemed like super fucking violent to me,
Right.
But like now it's just like, well, it's just an effect, it's just an alien. Obviously these graphics aren't that good anymore. Like it's like a whole thing. And I think,
like, even
yeah, go ahead.
My fault. No, what I was going to say, I mean, even to that extent, like, there are games that have just gone through that over time. We had the same conversation, 20, 25 years ago with Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, exactly.
And now it's this beloved franchise. But back then it was like, oh, this game is too violent. This game showcased blood and all that, which led Nintendo to do what they did. They replaced blood with sweat, like gray blood or gray sweat or something like that. It's just like, now, I wouldn't say desensitized, but it's normalcy to that franchise. Like, you're gonna get over the top stuff. But that's kudos to Ed Boon and them over there. They took that and they embraced it and they magnified it. Okay,
right.
We're gonna go way off the deep end, not just give you blood, but over the top. And it made it what it is. It's the same thing with Grand Theft Auto. We had its trials and tribulations, and now you expect that.
Actually, that's a great fucking comparison. First, the 3D Grand Theft Auto trilogy on PS2. 3 and Vice City and San Andreas, they were super adult, but they were also ridiculously cartoony violent. And then when we got to 4 and 5, it became realistic violence. Right. And I think it's, and I definitely in this day and age, like, I don't want to like glamorize or glorify violence. Like, real violence is bad. Like, it's not cool.
Right.
But it's the same thing for me as an R-rated movie. If you're going to see an R-rated movie, you're probably going to see some blood. You're going to see people saying fuck a lot. Right. Probably you're going to see sex and nudity. And you probably, more than likely, especially it seems a lot lately, you're probably going to see some form of rape in in a movie, right? And so it's like, well, if you don't want to see that, that's why there's ratings. That is literally why there's ratings on the box or on video games or movies or anything like that, And it's like it's one thing. Like, let's take another example. You a Samurai Jack fan?
I watched a few episodes. I didn't really get deep into it. I watched a few episodes.
Okay.
Um,
So, I mean, it was a cartoon,
right.
end of the 90s, early 2000s, something like that.
It
And
was by the creative Pop-Up Girls, right?
yeah, and Dexter's Laboratory, same guy.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and it was a samurai, right? And he's fighting robots, and you cut them open, and they bleed oil or whatever,
Right.
and it's like got swords and violence, and it's like very, very, very action heavy, right? you know
Right.
and that was like back then. And then a few years ago they had a fifth season that like completed the storyline, except it was made for Adult Swim on Cartoon Network, so it was adult. There was real blood and real violence and all that kind of stuff, but it was the same art style, the same cast, the same writers, the same directors,
Right.
and they were just closing out the story. I'll bet, you know, practically 20 years later. The kids
Right.
who watch that, they are adults now. And what they did with that show was they didn't take anything away from the original art style. They just merely added Jack not killing robots. Instead,
Right.
there were people, or if he got shot with an arrow, he'd bleed.
Right.
And you know, for me, like, I love that. Like, I love that the creator had the respect to treat the audience that grew up, that it's like, oh, yo, it's 18 years later. The people who
Right.
would want to watch this are now adults, and we kept the same art style. We just adulted it up for you.
Right.
And in that sense, I don't feel like you're losing anything creatively. Like if you'd had a fifth season and it was still the same, like, cartoony violence, I guess, like I don't think you would have lost anything either. Like I think there's a lot to say about the people who play or choose to play violent, hyper violent, non-realistic or hyper violent realistic video games. And I don't think that the commentary on that is or should be swayed by like what I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say here. I think the commentary on that should be, if you don't want that and you want to rage against a particular product or a particular movie, don't see it. Don't buy it. Don't don't engage with it, because if you don't want to be a part of that conversation, then don't be a part of that conversation. Don't make it
Right.
don't make it a part of your conversation because you're suddenly outraged that the creators and designers decided to do something a little different or change it. Because there's been 7
Right.
years. There's been 7 years between the original Last of Us and now, and the original Last of Us was super realistic for its day, but it's not now. You
Right.
know, like, I mean, I think it still holds up pretty well visually, but even the remastered that's got a fresh coat of paint on it, it's still
Right.
like, oh yeah, these character models are not
You can tell, like,
superb
especially
anymore.
you can tell, especially if you looking side by side. It's obvious, like it's blatantly obvious the leaps and bounds that Naughty Dog has made visually from the remaster up to part 2.
Oops, gotta keep hitting that thing. Yeah, for sure. So, are there any other salient points you wanted to hit on in your infamous notes?
Yes, I guess one, which is probably one of my most favorite scenes in both of the games, which is almost parallel to the iconic Jurassic scene in part 1, is the museum scene in part 2.
Yeah,
That is my favorite scene
I love that.
in that whole game. Oh my gosh, man. That was when I played that scene, it starts off, you know, they're in the woods, and then Joel pushes Ellie in the water and says, okay, he taught her how to swim. And I thought that would have been a nice gesture to start the beginning off, but it probably would have been it would have set the game off on a different tone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to see an older Ellie like coming out of the water after she, you know, might have either fought an infected or she's just swimming or something, and you see at that moment, damn, Joel taught her how to swim. That's all right, you know.
Uh-huh.
But I love that scene because she starts off, she's like, it's her birthday, and she starts off saying, is it a dinosaur? And Joe's like, no, it's not a dinosaur. Why would it be a dinosaur? And you hit the corner, you get to the museum, and it's this huge dinosaur, and it's like, oh man, you know, and that shows like that moment because me at that scene, she still doesn't know what Joel did. So they have this bond, you know, this very heavy bond, this father-daughter bond, where you see the love that Joel has for Ellie, just as he has for Sarah, all over again. And it's the most loving scene in that game, my most beloved scene in that game, especially when they got into the small spaceship. And
that was one of my favorite moments for sure, because you know the thing that they showed in her room and stuff with Ellie is you know she has a real affinity for space because you know she's read books, you know she's got the Savage Starlight posters, which are the comic books she found in the first game, you know, and they have that whole thing, and he found a tape of a space launch, and I thought that was just one of the sweetest moments ever. And I think you hit the nail on the head of the fact that it's played later and not up front is it sets the wrong tone. And really, you know, one of the things that I think the game exemplifies as well as the first game is the game really ultimately is about love and all of the different forms and paths that it can take or push you down because of love. And I think one of the things that's a highlight in this game, and probably the last thing I'm going to say on it, unless you've got some more stuff to say, is you have a game that gives you a roller coaster of emotions. It makes you mad, makes you sad, it makes you cry, it makes you angry, it makes you, you know, have to kill dogs because they're going to kill you, and you feel kind of bad about it, you know. And it has realistic violence that maybe makes you question, like, okay, why would I shoot this guy that way, you know, intermixed with all of these lovely little itty bitty memories with Joel and Ellie and their relationship as pseudo father and pseudo daughter. And I think Vision from Avengers Age of Ultron summed it up absolutely best. And this is so true for The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2, is a thing is not beautiful because it lasts.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
You know, and after all that you just said, that's why this game is going to win Game of the Year. Because there aren't too many games that I know of other than this game's predecessor that can make you laugh, that can make you cry, that can make you love, that can make you angry, that can fuel you and drive you, and that can make you sit back and look at this world as even in its darkest moment, you find this little bit of light that glimpses through the memories. And that storytelling at its finest, that is the ability to create a picture and a portrait of just everything that you just want to showcase. And that's not a dime a dozen video game. It's not in this industry. There's only a few people that can pull that off, and Naughty Dog is one of those few people that can pull that type of story off. And you add that with incredible acting from Ashley Johnson, from Laura Bailey, you know, from Troy Baker, and so on, you know.
Yeah, and don't forget, famous TV and movie actor who's going to be fucking Jim Gordon in the next Batman. Fucking Jeffrey Wright is in this fucking game, and I had no idea.
And it's funny because when they introduce Isaac, and I'm hearing him, I'm like, that voice sounds familiar. Like I know that
and then
voice.
You see the face, and it's like, this man is doing the best Jeffrey Wright impression.
So I got a funny story.
Go for it.
This was years ago, where I was at my old part-time job. I think I was still in college, and I was at my old part-time job in Union Station, at the Swatch store. And it's like early in the morning. It's me and my other coworker that's there, and it's like maybe like 10 o'clock in the morning, and this train station's kind of quiet. And we're in the store, and this kid comes walking in. So the kid walks in, and mind you, the store that where I'm at, I used to work at, is no bigger than like 30 square feet. It's a small store. And kid's looking around, he's looking at the watches, and he's minding his business, looking at the different colors and all that. And then there's this guy that walks up to because we have glass doors. We had glass doors all around the store. And so this guy walks up to the front of the glass door, but he turns around because he's on his phone. So I'm like, okay, that must be his son. He's trying to take care of stuff on the phone while his son's in there looking at the watches, right? So pay no attention to, mind his business and all that, right? So about 10, 15 minutes go by, the guy walks in the store, and looking at the watches with his son. And I'm looking at my coworker, and I'm like, this guy looks really familiar. And so, mind you, he had on glasses, and he's real chill, right? Real incognito.
Yeah.
And he's talking with his son, having his glasses. He likes him. And he turned up for a quick second, and I'm looking at him, and I look at my coworker, I'm like, yo. And mind you, I had just finished watching at this point. Boardwalk Empire was huge on HBO. That was like one of my favorite shows watching at the time.
Okay.
And I'm like, yo, that's Jeffrey fucking Wright. Yo, I'm like, yo.
Really?
Like,
so I haven't seen Boardwalk Empire. Is he in it?
He's in it. He plays.
Oh, really?
Dr. Narcisse. He plays. It's in the second season.
Okay.
He plays a character called Dr. Narcisse, and he's extremely good at this character. Extremely good.
I mean, Jeffrey Wright, I feel like this point is the next national treasure.
he's actually from here too. He's from DC.
Oh, I believe that.
Yeah, he's from DC, and he glimpsed up. I took a glimpse at him, and I'm like, yo, that's Jeffrey fucking Wright. I was like, because I'm like, I think that's a celebrity. But I'm like, and he's like, really? Because he didn't watch Boardwalk Empire either, so he doesn't know who Jeffrey Wright is. I'm like, dude, I think that's Jeffrey Wright. And so he's with his son. He's still watching, looking at watches. And I just said, you know what, I'm going for it. And so I looked at him he was like, are you Jeffrey Wright? He was like, yes, I am. I was like, oh my god. I was like, yo, I just watched Boardwalk Empire. Like, I didn't mean to spaz, because I'm really good with celebrities. I really don't spaz out, with celebrities, because I've worked in areas where celebrities come in all the time.
Yeah.
But like, I had literally just watched him on board, and then mind you, my first encounter with seeing him was in Quantum of Solace. Casino Royale, because he was a CIA agent helping James Bond.
Ah, fuck, you're right.
Royale, yeah, he was a CIA agent helping Daniel Craig. And yeah, man, I was like, yo, real nice dude, real calm, real chill guy. You could tell like it was early, so he's kind of like still like waking up. So I guess wherever he was going somewhere with his son.
Okay.
And yeah, man, I was like, he's a real good dude, really, really good dude.
That's fucking cool, dude.
Yeah, like, that was my one moment. I met Jeffrey Wright, but
oh man, that's super cool. And what a cool a high note, I think, to end our spoiler review discussion, what have you, on The Last of Us Part 2. Whew.
I know. I told you this is gonna be a long one. I
figured.
This is a long, man, because this game had, when I was playing,
it's a long game.
Yeah, I'm like, this got so much stuff to cover. Like, this is gonna be a wow. This is really gonna be a wow.
Yeah, for
sure.
I'm
glad we did it. I had fun.
Yeah. I'm glad I fucking lost sleep over this, so I can wake up early on the 4th of fucking July.
I know, and I still got stuff to do after this. So I'm like,
Yeah, I bet. Me too.
okay.
Me too. Me too. Well, alrighty, Dame. It's been an absolute pleasure, man. I hope you have a good, happy 4th of July. Stay safe out there, and have a good time.
Same to you as well, too. Same to you as well, man.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, that's the end of the spoiler cast. It's gonna cut out like now.
Bye.
Oh man. All right. Thank you for listening to a Dynamic Works production podcast. You can find our podcast at www.dynamicworksproductions.com. Feel free to email us at dynamicworks@mac.com.
This is Dominic Armato, the voice of Guybrush Threepwood, and you're listening to a Dynamic Works production podcast.
The Citadel, Arrival, is the first installment in a series of epic science fiction short stories reminiscent of the Pulp Fiction style. It's a fast-paced story that will take you through twists and turns that you will not expect, until they are thrust upon you with all the force, excitement, and chaos of a plasma cannon blast. The story follows Katarl, a nobody cog in the working wheels of a futuristic society run completely by Megacorp, a corporation that carefully runs and manages the lives of the people living under its sphere of power. On one of Katarl's few and far between days off from work, an outing he had hoped would be fun and relaxing turns into an explosive adventure that drags him kicking and screaming into situations and challenges that will make him question every aspect of his life. Watch this colorful tapestry unfurl as Katarl and his newfound allies find their way through this classic, yet oddly surprising tale of good and evil, where nothing is quite what it appears to be. That's The Citadel, Arrival, by author Tim K.A. Trotter, available right now on Amazon Kindle Store and iTunes iBookstore for only $2.99. Cut out? Or, yeah, cut? Just cut it? Whatever. You know what you're doing, Tim.
That was fun.
Alrighty, that was great. Thanks, Dame.
Absolutely, man. I'll get up with you.
Alrighty. I'll catch you later. Have a good 4th, dude.
Same to you, man. All right.
Alrighty, peace out.
Yeah.
Yo. Yo. Alright.
It's a little early.
Yeah, I just got up. Alright, just I'm gonna do a couple of things here.
Yeah, I know I woke up at 9 o'clock. Get myself together.
Well, it's like noon over there, right?
No, it's 11:20.
Oh no, 11. Okay.
Yeah, I knew this was gonna be long. That's why I was like, let's just get up early and get all we can get out, because we're gonna be a while. We're gonna be a while with this.
Okay, looks like the backup's rolling. Let's see, my mic's connected properly. This is done up here. Oh my god. Okay, let's move this mic. Hey. Alright, moving the mic was a bad idea.
What happened?
I moved it like a foot because it's like right next to my couch. I usually put it center of my couch, and then I sit center. So I just moved it like a few inches, and then I guess it was just a few inches too wrong, and the USB died on the mic.
You like nope. I heard nothing for a second. I heard radio stuff.
Exactly. Okay.
What happened?
Well, let me start.
What happened?
Let me start the backup recorder again.
All right. Yeah. So apparently Fable is a real thing. That's the thing. So I'm waiting to see what Microsoft is going to say on that.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's definitely with that corporate Twitter leak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who's officially developing it? It's probably who we already know.
I think so too.
But
I mean, I could imagine it being like a collab, you know, like maybe Engine and you know, if it's got any multiplayer and all that kind of stuff being done by the Playground Games people, since that's what they do, is open world multiplayer with their racing games.
Let's say they do that very well. They find a way to make it fun. Then that's how they separate their identity from the Horizon and the Horizon. You know, I mean Forza and the Forza Horizon.
Yeah.
Franchise, you know, so
yeah, it is awkward, both Microsoft and Sony having a game that's called Horizon. To be fair, though, Microsoft had that shit first.
For like a good 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay. Let's see here. Do I sound good and centered?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Clearly.
Very good. All right. Got the coffee. Got a bagel. Got my breakfast. All right. I should have a little more of that coffee. My voice is hella crapply.